The story begins with Xiao Zhan, our protagonist, in a very critical situation, hanging on a cage full of zombies. His former partner who betrayed him makes fun of him and reminds him that all his friends have died and that he will be next. At that moment, Xiao Zhan feels a deep guilt for having trusted her and longs for her to suffer a painful death. The true villain is the ex-girlfriend of our protagonist, who, when she finds a new, more powerful and rich boyfriend, has asked him to eliminate him. This is how a corpulent man accepts the task and proposes to torture the protagonist slowly so that his wife can enjoy the show before ending it. And since that was not enough, that man with a sarcastic tone thanked Xiao Zhan for the supplies which will ensure his comfort for several months. It is as if in a matter of seconds our protagonist falls into the cage of the zombies, which attack him mercilessly. Tied up and suffering, the protagonist can only scream while he dreams of taking revenge on his ex-girlfriend named Qin He and the corpulent man Lai Chuan, mentioning that if he is ever given a second chance, he would not hesitate twice. But suddenly, Xiao Zhan wakes up and listens to Qin He demanding explanations for not having included his name in the writing of the house, thus questioning his love for her. While trying to reconcile, he realizes that he could have returned before the apocalypse. In his past life, Qin He deceived him by stealing the inheritance from his parents and leaving him on the street. During the global apocalypse that turned people into zombies, our protagonist, with the help of his friends, managed to survive and establish a safe refuge with enough resources for several months. And at that moment Qin He reappeared, pretending to be desperate and looking for a place to hide, thus regaining the sympathy of Xiao Zhan, which soon realized that it was a mistake to trust her, who the next night opened the doors of the refuge to her enemies. In addition, the traitor demanded 400,000 yuan and the house as a price to marry her, acting with arrogance, sure that Xiao Zhan was captivated by her beauty and did not see her true character. But this time things would be different, since the protagonist will not allow this evil person to manipulate him, although he knows that he must act cautiously so as not to raise suspicions, since if he gets carried away by anger at this time it could be harmful. Qin He gave him a week to meet his demands, since otherwise the wedding would be cancelled. But unexpectedly Xiao Zhan threw Qin He out of his house, assuring him that he understood the situation. Qin He, surprised by the unexpected attitude of the protagonist, did not understand the change in his behavior. But now that he had discarded the traitor, Xiao Zhan realized that there was only a month left for the apocalypse, so he needed to prepare urgently. At that moment, the protagonist received a notification similar to that of a video game. After activating the apocalypse system, Xiao Zhan received a mission called Preparation for the Apocalypse, which asked him to acquire a land and accumulate enough resources for a year. Upon completing this mission, he would earn 10 points that he could use to obtain rewards in the system store. Xiao Zhan was eager for bonuses and wondered what he could buy in the store, although it was not yet clear what items were available. The system store mainly offered loot boxes and potions to increase physical strength. However, what worried Xiao Zhan the most was his hunger, so he decided to order an elegant dinner at home. He remembered how in a precarious situation. This time it was not going to be limited, since with the apocalypse about to break out and the zombies everywhere, he had to take advantage of the delicious food while he could. A few hours later the delivery arrived, and our protagonist would never have allowed a 3-star order, so he decided to start with a pork stew for 300 yuan. After surviving with basic food during the apocalypse, that food seemed like a real delicacy. Our protagonist did not stop there and continued to devour with enthusiasm. When he was about to finish, his phone began to ring. It was Chuya, a friend of Qin He, who had already discussed the subject with her, which he began to furiously complain about how he dared to treat Qin He that way. Chuya insisted that he should show his love with a property gift, or otherwise he could not claim that he loved her. According to Chuya, Qin He was putting him to the test and he had failed. Chuya warned him that if he did not bring him the writing of the house and 1,000,000 yuan in cash as an apology, it would not help to resolve the misunderstanding, which could result in a breakup. Frustrated by Chuya's attitude, Xiao Zhan thought it would be better to get rid of her. Despite Chuya's attempts to protest, the protagonist hung up the call, tired of the people who were only interested in his money. At that time, his priority was to find and buy suitable land. He wanted to build a robust fortress, which was not only easy to defend, but was also close to a water source and a forest. The next morning, he arrived at a real estate agency. He was immediately received by a consultant, who asked him if he was here to rent or buy a house. Xiao Zhan clarified that he was not interested in any of those options, he was looking for something much more valuable. Just at that moment, a sales manager approached and asked the consultant Xiao Ning to help move some boxes, since they had received a large shipment of toilet paper that day. She tried to explain that she had a client, but she could not convince anyone. Manager Sun did not consider Xiao Zhan as a true client. He even reprimanded his employee for forgetting everything he had taught him. Convinced that being a good real estate agent requires charisma, he sent her to the backyard and told Xiao Zhan that since he looked like a loser in cheap clothes, he probably couldn't even afford to buy a toilet, so he didn't deserve to be treated like a client. The protagonist was upset by the manager's disrespectful attitude, who looked at others with superiority, so he asked the manager to repeat his comments and explain his contempt. With an arrogant attitude, the manager replied that he was superior to people like Xiao Zhan, and in a provocative gesture he said that if he could afford to buy a toilet, he would eat excrement alive. Seeing Xiao Zhan's expression, the manager soon realized that he would regret his words. To which the protagonist in response suggested that he look for fresh excrement later, and he loudly announced that he was not here to rent or sell a house but to acquire land. The other customers were surprised to see someone as wealthy as to buy a property, and immediately Miss Zhao Ning invited the protagonist to sit down for a detailed presentation, while the manager Zhang observed suspiciously, doubting Xiao Zhan's ability to pay. This is how she showed all the plots available, but Xiao Zhan was already clear what he wanted. He just had to specify his requirements and see if they found something suitable. Xiao Zhan wanted a land near mountains and water, ideally with running water. It would also be perfect if there were factories or large buildings in the area. To find a suitable option, Xiao Ning needed some time, but soon manager Zhang came back from behind, as if he had an inclination to do so. He thought that the land that met all the requirements was in the eastern district. However, Xiao Ning thought it was a bad idea, since that area belonged to the city of Ti, which had many unfinished factories and pending projects, so that property would not be attractive to customers. However, the manager was convinced that Xiao Zhan, who in his eyes seemed a failure with unrealistic demands, was not here to buy land, but to cause problems. But the protagonist was not worried about the location of the land, as long as it met his requirements. Unfinished factories were not an inconvenience either, rather they represented an advantage. After reviewing everything, Xiao Zhan decided that the land was just what he needed. And he thought that with the wire of Pew the property would be easy to protect, and unfinished factories would save him a lot of time and money in construction. So he proceeded to buy the land, willing to sign the contract and pay instantly. Xiao Ning was in a state of shock. He could not believe that someone in his right mind would want to acquire a land with unfinished factories. But Xiao Zhan remained firm and asked him to speed up the process because there was someone who could not wait to eat fresh manure. Soon manager Sun had the check in his hand, without being able to believe that this beggar was willing to pay 300,000 for a land with abandoned factories. But in that Xiao Zhan reminded him before leaving that he had completed the payment, and now it was his turn to do his part. The other customers, having fun with the situation, began to pressure the manager to hurry up, since the live broadcast had already begun. One of them, although a little disgusted, promised that at least the manure would be fresh since he had just eaten some shrimp. On the other hand, the prota had already completed the first step when buying the land, and now we needed to find money for supplies. Upon leaving the real estate agency, he was recognized by Lai Chuang, who was surprised to see the chaos that was unleashing inside. The staff and customers were forcing manager Sun to keep his promise, while he desperately asked for help and begged not to have to eat manure. Meanwhile, Kingxi was busy painting her nails and enjoying her carefree life. But in that she received a call from Lai Chuang, who informed her about the purchase of the land by Xiao Zhan. Kingxi, surprised by this, could not believe where she had gotten so much money from. Lai Chuang discovered that Xiao Zhan had paid 300,000, probably using the money he had saved for his house, which infuriated her a lot. Although Lai Chuang advised her to calm down and talk to Xiao Zhan to understand the situation, she was too angry to do so, and planned to expose him on the networks. Meanwhile, the prota was worried about the costs of supplies and the construction of his base. All his calm thoughts were interrupted by a frantic knock on the door. It was Kingxi with her friend. She was still furious because she dared to spend her money, but Xiao Zhan still could not understand what she was talking about. Kingxi, on the other hand, continued to think about exposing him, stating that he had used the money from the bride price to buy land. That money belonged to her, and since he had bought the land with that, it also belonged to her. The prota did not even know how to respond to the madness of that woman. He finally decided to explain things to her in a way that even a fool like her could understand. He had a lot of money, but was not going to spend a single cent on her. He also told her that he knew about his romance with Lai Chuan. Kingxi did not understand what was happening and how he knew all that. In that, his friend, seeing how things were developing, suggested that everyone calm down and resolve this little misunderstanding as a couple, but Xiao Zhan was not going to waste his precious time with those two. So he made it clear that he had not misunderstood anything, since he knew that Kingxi was Lai Chuan's fat old man's girlfriend. After a confrontation, the door was closed in Kingxi's face, who did not understand how he knew about his relationship with Lai Chuan, since they had always been discreet when renting rooms. His friend did not understand either because he had not informed him directly about these matters. Although Kingxi claimed that it was not a serious relationship and that they had only rented rooms occasionally, the situation was still confusing for her. In the midst of such a chaotic situation, they had no choice but to return home and rethink their strategy, since their friend had made a mistake with Xiao Zhan. On the other hand, Chuan was not going to stop and was determined to win Xiao Zhan's affection, considering that they are both friends. The next day, Xiao Zhan arrived with a construction team to rehabilitate a factory and wondered how long the work would take. The captain explained that it would be necessary to reinforce the walls, build protection towers, install wire fences, reinforce the armored steel doors and add bulletproof glass, which would take time. The captain was also wondering what kind of power Xiao Zhan had offended to need such a level of security. Xiao Zhan warned him not to ask too many questions, since knowing too much was not convenient. Our protagonist wanted to know if the construction could be completed in a month. The captain replied that it would not be possible in that time, although many would be willing to try. Mentioning that the safety and well-being of the workers was important, he surprised Xiao Zhan, who thought the problem was only economic. Xiao Zhan immediately requested the budget, which he calculated that if the project was to be completed, it would involve a cost of 6 figures. The total price would be 20 million, and they requested an advance of 5 million to start immediately, but that option was not entirely convenient for our protagonist. He wanted the work to start immediately and promised to transfer the money within a week. The construction company did not have to worry about the payment, since if it did not do it, the land would become theirs. But suddenly in that, Shuya arrived at the construction site, hugged the defiant arm of Xiao Zhan and asked him what he was doing here. The protagonist was tired of this woman, since in his past life, she and Kingxi had excluded him from the inheritance of his parents, and this time he had decided to make her pay in full. All his attempts were in vain, although trying to act kindly, he could see his true nature. In that she asked if this was the land that he had bought, and if he would build a large mansion. To which the protagonist immediately pushed her aside, and told her that what he decided to build here was none of her business. She could not understand what was happening since that loser had behaved in such a strange way. Since normally a simple touch of his arm was enough to make him smile and accelerate his pulse. But today none of that worked. The protagonist, for his part, stood aside coldly and began to give instructions to the workers about the mistakes they were making, pointing out that the door needed to be expanded. Shuya, seeing the opportunity of gold that escaped him, knew that since Kingxi had ruined everything with her maneuvers, she had to move and the land had to be hers. Xiao Zhan returned to his home and began to think about how to get more money. After mortgaging his house to the bank, he only managed to obtain a loan of 3 million, a sum that was not enough for the first phase of the construction. However, he reflected that since the apocalypse was imminent, selling the house to a few people would not be a big problem. It was something that he had to solve soon. At that moment, the annoying old neighbor Grandpa Lai knocked on the door. Old Lai, a wealthy owner of the first 2 floors of the building, had unsuccessfully tried to buy Xiao Zhan's 3rd floor. As a retaliation, he had been doing unpleasant things such as painting doors, throwing garbage, placing coffins and jamming locks, just to make him uncomfortable. Now he falsely complained that Xiao Zhan had made noise at a party the night before, when in reality the prota had gone to sleep early. Knowing that the old man wanted his house, Xiao Zhan decided to sell him the property. The old man could not believe it, but Xiao Zhan put a condition. He wanted to stay in the house for 6 more months while he was looking for a new place, and he had to immediately transfer 5 million to his account to cover the deposit of the new house. The old man accepted the condition, but demanded a contract to avoid unexpected changes. Xiao Zhan agreed, and it was decided that the old man would face the consequences during the apocalypse. With the transfer of 5 million and the loan from the bank, Xiao Zhan raised a total of 8 million. Now it was time to complete the next task and claim his reward. The largest supermarket was ideal for this mission. Xiao Zhan began to carefully supply himself with supplies for next year. People around him looked at him as if he were crazy and preferred to stay away. But finally he went to the cashier's line dragging a large number of supermarket carts. People around him did not understand why Xiao Zhan was buying so many things. They just laughed at him, considering him another credulity that was carried away by rumors about the apocalypse and the end of the world. But the opinions of others did not matter at all. The crucial thing was that Xiao Zhan had completed the task assigned by the system and had earned 10 points. Among all the options in the system store, the supply box cost 10 points, and Xiao Zhan did not hesitate to spend all his points on it. The purchase was successful and received the mysterious box. Upon opening it, he discovered a level 1 space ring that gave him a subspace of 500 cubic meters. In addition, time was stopped within that space, which ensured that the stored objects did not deteriorate. This was an extremely valuable acquisition, and along with the new object, he also received a new mission. He had to accumulate 10 years of provisions to fulfill it. This mission offered a reward of 20 points. However, at that time, the supermarket security chief made an urgent call to him. That man named Zhang Tao had received reports about a problematic client. It turned out that the protagonist recognized this guy, since Zhang Tao had attended the same institute as Xiao Zhan, and was known for being a local thug who intimidated the weak and feared the strong. Immediately Zhang Tao demanded that he return the items he had bought, warning that it would not be understandable if he did not. Xiao Zhan replied that he was not going to return anything, pointing out that as a client he had the right to what he had paid, which Zhang Tao insisted on promptly paying for the items immediately, threatening with severe consequences if he did not. After an hour of calculation, it was determined that the total of the items in the supermarket was 56,000 yuans. When Zhang Tao demanded the immediate payment, Xiao Zhan did not hesitate to use his credit card to cover the amount, handling it with confidence. The transaction was carried out without problems, surprising the security chief. But before leaving, Xiao Zhan asked Zhang Tao to apologize publicly, or otherwise he would return all the items. Although Zhang Tao thought that Xiao Zhan was looking for problems, there were numerous witnesses who backed the protagonist and had seen the whole situation. The incident was recorded on video, and Xiao Zhan used the material as a threat, warning Zhang Tao that he would make it viral on the internet if he did not apologize. In addition, Xiao Zhan promised him that if the apology was genuine, he would be willing to make purchases in that place multiplied by 10. And he told him that if he doubted his word, he could bring the machine to show him his bank balance. When Zhang Tao saw the 7 million in the account, he could not believe it. Xiao Zhan only demanded an apology to continue buying, while the security chief fought with his pride. However, the pressure was too much, and he ended up giving up and apologizing. On leaving, Xiao Zhan advised Zhang Tao to be more cautious in the future, since you never know how a situation can change. Then Zhang Tao, with a false attitude of kindness, asked why Xiao Zhan was buying so many things, which he replied that it was none of his business, and that he was planning a great project. Zhang Tao, understanding the opportunity, he suggested that the items in the supermarket warehouse were not enough for a great business and recommended Zhang, a mayor with whom he was in contact, since he worked in the supermarket. This is how Zhang Tao got in touch with Zhang and happily informed him that he had found an important client. Xiao Zhan realized that some people never change, and seeing that Zhang Tao and Zhang continued to collaborate, he could only wonder how much they were swindling the supermarket. They soon arrived at the mayor's warehouse. A luxurious car approached with an air of superiority. Seeing Zhang's arrogant attitude, the protagonist noticed that he had probably never been deceived and decided to correct that. Although Zhang did not immediately recognize Xiao Zhan, Zhang Tao reminded him that they had been classmates in high school. After a moment, Zhang remembered the protagonist as someone of character. Although he despised his simple clothes, Zhang hated those who pretended to be rich without really having it, and seeing the appearance of Xiao Zhan, he assumed that he was not a person of importance. And he was upset with Zhang Tao for introducing him to a client who he considered insignificant. So without a doubt he kicked him like reprimand for wasting time with people who were not worth it. Zhang was not willing to accept that possibility, since with his vast experience in the business world, he thought he could identify rich people just by looking at them. When calling Zhang illiterate, this unleashed his anger, who confronted him by demanding that he repeat the offense. Although Xiao Zhan did not ignore and reiterated the insult, he soon realized that what really bothered Zhang was not contempt, but the term illiterate. Zhang Tao, seeing that the tension was increasing, intervened to warn Xiao Zhan not to provoke Zhang anymore, since he really hated being called that. However, in doing this, Zhang Tao received another kick and more insults from Zhang, who was frustrated because he could not do what he wanted. So very angry he proposed to Xiao Zhan an election, or bought a truck of goods or crawled to the ground. Which the protagonist was complacent with the proposal, and ordered Zhang to release his jacket and give him the account number. In an instant, the expression of anger on Zhang's face turned into amazement. Xiao Zhan had transferred 1 million to his account. Although it was only a deposit, his intention was to buy goods for a total value of 5 million. Immediately Zhang asked what type of products he needed. To which Xiao Zhan replied that he required oil, rice, salt, sandwiches, and drinks, in other words products that could not deteriorate quickly. Zhang, with a barely visible smile, saw in this an opportunity to get rid of a note of almost expired food. Upon arriving at the warehouse with the shipment, Zhang offered Xiao Zhan to take all the merchandise with a 10% discount on the majority price. The offer seemed attractive, but Xiao Zhan soon suspected that Zhang was not willing to sell the food at such a low price without any trick, so he decided to inspect the quality of the products, and discovered that although they seemed new, they were almost on their expiration date. Although Zhang tried to offer a 50% discount, Xiao Zhan rejected the offer, preferring to use the 5 million to buy better quality food. They finally reached an agreement. Xiao Zhan would buy the almost expired food at half price, with the payment deferred to a month. Zhang could not believe what Xiao Zhan was saying, since he told him that he was willing to mortgage his house to buy the almost expired food. But Zhang did not understand why Xiao Zhan needed those products, which he told him that very soon they would have great value. But the protagonist, without going into more detail, asked Zhang to send the merchandise to the provided address. At that moment, he received a call about the sale of his house and quickly said goodbye to Zhang and Zhang Tao. The buyer was an old man named Mr. Dang, who offered an advance of 400,000 and gave Xiao Zhan 3 months to move. Although everything seemed to be going very well, Xiao Zhan felt somewhat suspicious. He asked the old man why he was in such a hurry, and he explained that his granddaughter was about to change schools and needed a new home, and the protagonist was the only one who was selling a house in the neighborhood. The old man, being so honest, provided him with all the information, which Xiao Zhan asked if he could use that information to increase the price. The old man, realizing his mistake, panicked and begged the protagonist not to do that, since it was all he had saved. However, Xiao Zhan was not one of those who would take advantage of people's good faith. He assured him that the deal would continue and then sign the contract. The old man was delighted because now his granddaughter would have a place to live. He was so courteous and kind that he even apologized to Xiao Zhan for interrupting his work. Realizing how honest and kind the old man was, the protagonist thought that he and his granddaughter would not last long in the apocalypse. In that he called the old man who was already leaving and asked him for his address. Shortly after, the protagonist arrived at his land, where the construction was progressing at a good pace. By informing the foreman that the payment would be made soon, he became interested in the progress of the work. It turned out that almost 80% of the construction was finished, with the walls and doors reinforced exactly as requested, and the warehouse based in the factory was ready to use, which was excellent news. So Xiao Zhan immediately called Zhang and asked him to bring the supplies as soon as possible. This is how the warehouse, configured as a fortress for the apocalypse, began to be filled with resources under the strict instructions of the protagonist. Everything was ready for the afternoon. When the workers left, Xiao Zhan was finally able to evaluate the work done. Everything was as planned and now he could relax. At the same time, the system sent a notification indicating that the protagonist had successfully completed the task, which gave him 20 points from the system. Upon opening the system store, he found a box with unlocked skills and decided to buy it. Upon opening it, he received the I skill of level 1 mind, which allowed him to detect hostility in others. Xiao Zhan was satisfied, since he considered that this skill would be very useful in the first stages of the apocalypse. In addition, the system gave the protagonist a new mission. He had to get a large number of weapons. However, this did not worry him, since it was exactly what he had in mind, so he went to the darkest area of the city to prepare for what was coming. And in a matter of seconds the protagonist was in the dark night market of the dark sector of the city, surrounded by transactions and noise. Suddenly in that, he ran into a man who was familiar to him. It was the lover of King He. This man was trying to aggressively lower the price of some false jewels and finally got the seller to accept his offer. Xiao Zhan did not expect to meet him that night, but it was not surprising that this guy was interested in false jade bracelets, since King He's witch was naive enough to be deceived by gifts of lies. A few steps away, he found a stand that offered some promising weapons, sharp blades arranged on the ground, each more deadly than the previous one. As soon as he saw those blades, a smile appeared on his face. He had finally found what he was looking for, and that's how he immediately leaned in front of the seller and asked him without hesitation if he had something more forceful in his offer. Which this guy, who looked like a military man, was not impressed by his question. He threw a blade sharpener at him and told the protagonist to sharpen the blades himself if he needed something more robust. Adopting a more serious tone, Xiao Zhan commented that none of those blades were resistant enough and what he was looking for was something much more solid. Realizing what that meant, this guy got extremely serious and asked if he was looking for problems. However, his irritation was interrupted by a notification on his phone, since 200,000 yuan had just been transferred to his bank account, and in front of him was our protag holding the receipt after sending the money through that. QR code at the stand. This was his way of calming the angry seller and showing that he was a serious buyer. Finally convinced, this guy called one of his assistants to watch the stand while he was in charge of the real business. His attitude towards Xiao Zhan changed radically, and he kindly led him to another building, since arguing outside could be uncomfortable, and they did not have problems to access the building apparently harmless. Already inside, that guy was now trying to offer Xiao Zhan some homemade weapons for small whites. They cost 2,000 yuan and the ammunition would be cheap. However, the protag rejected this guy's proposal, who then showed him imitation revolvers. The pistols were 5,000 yuan each and the bullets 5 yuan. Although the offer was acceptable for Xiao Zhan, he had already advanced 200,000 yuan, but he was not interested in that type of weaponry. Confused by this, he asked Xiao Zhan what he was looking for, which he explained to him that the previous transfer was only in advance of 10% of a total order of 2 million yuan. Concerned about the identity of the buyer, this guy asked him questions, but Xiao Zhan invented a story about how his subordinates handled these purchases and made it clear that he did not appreciate inquiries about his identity. Since the protag seemed serious, this man asked him to wait while he went to another room and closed the door with a key. Looking out the window, he assured Xiao Zhan that he had found the right contact, and whispered to him that he would take care of the matter and that he only needed an address to complete the transaction at midnight, and told him to bring the money in cash. When leaving the place, Xiao Zhan noticed that this guy treated him almost like a VIP. However, he returned to the night market street just when he ran into Lai Chuan again, who commented on this unexpected meeting in the black market and realized why Xiao Zhan had been spending so much lately. He also made him think about Kingxi. He assumed that he had been receiving financial advice and was now trying to sell everything to live well. But without worrying about the comments of that annoying individual, Xiao Zhan thought about testing his new ability. Activating his Eye of the Mind, a subtle aura illuminated his vision. He observed a happy face indicator on the guy's head that attended him, to whom we will call Mr. Armament, and an angry face on Lai Chuan's. The ability turned out to be as useful as expected. He decided to experiment a little more and commented negatively out loud about how he bought fake and second-hand products to deceive Kingxi, and mentioned that he also considered that she was a second-hand garbage type, so it made sense that it was worth so little. Upon hearing this, the anger indicator on Lai Chuan's head intensified, and began to curse Xiao Zhan for touching a sensitive point. Upon seeing the conflict, Mr. Armament intervened and asked the Prota if the fat man was causing problems. This is how he marked Lai Chuan as an enemy, and capturing the indirect of the Prota, Mr. Armament assured his new client that he and his team would be in charge of giving a lesson to this chubby guy, which Xiao Zhan was more than in agreement with, but he asked them not to give in since he had other plans for him in the future. Seeing that a group of thugs was approaching him, Lai Chuan immediately began to panic, stumbling with his words and losing his arrogant attitude. Without wasting any more time, Mr. Armament pulled out a gun, and the thugs quickly took care of the fat man, leaving him beaten and bruised in the middle of the dark road. His white suit was full of footprints and kick marks, and this incident only increased his hatred for Xiao Zhan. 2 days later in the warehouse, both parties arrived in time to conclude the agreement. Xiao Zhan saw a truck full of suspicious boxes, which contained the weapons he had requested. With the arrival of the armament, he completed his mission of preparing for the battle, obtaining 10 points from the system and increasing his total to 20. Among the boxes he found a variety of heavy armament. In addition, the system gave him an extra prize, a physical improvement potion that turned out to be twice as effective as the potions available in the store. With a smile of satisfaction, the protagonist injected the potion, waiting for only a slight discomfort. However, the process turned out to be much more painful and unpleasant than he anticipated. As an average adult with a physical score of 5, an increase of +2 represented an increase of 40% in his overall capacity. He then decided to review the catalog of the system and found another physical improvement potion. After administering this second potion, his physical score rose to 8, thus maximizing his strength. Now he was approximately 60% stronger than an average person and was eager to test it. Observing some iron bars scattered throughout the warehouse, Xiao Zhan had the idea of testing his new strength. He took one of the iron bars used to reinforce buildings and threw it into the air. Then he kicked it with all his strength and speed, and immediately the bar bent significantly, and the impulse made it hit the nearby wall, leaving a great dent in it. With his new strength, his bare hands were now practically weapons in themselves. He was ready to face an early apocalypse without problem. To prevent the newly acquired weapons from being discovered, he stored them in his space ring to keep them safe. He simply pointed his magic ring at the truck and the content was absorbed immediately. According to his memories, the next day would mark the beginning of the apocalypse, so he didn't have much time to do all the pending tasks. Despite everything, he could not get his head out of the image of an old man begging to be bought his house with a modest sum of money that he had gathered with effort for his granddaughter. Despite having faced countless situations of life or death and betrayals during the first apocalypse, he had always maintained his humanity and never ignored the misery of the less fortunate. And he thought that maybe he should send some essential supplies to the old man. It was the least he could do to help him and improve the chances of survival of his granddaughter. As part of his plan for the apocalypse, the protagonist decided to reimburse the old man for the funds provided. The next day, he went to a ruined apartment building in a depressed area of another city. Without the help of a GPS, it would have been impossible to locate this place, given how hidden and deteriorated it was. The old man had been renting in this old and cheap building without an elevator, which indicated that he was not in the best economic situation. When he arrived at the door, Xiaoyan knew that he had to remove the supplies from his storage ring to avoid complications when explaining its origin. He activated the ring and the corridor was filled with boxes stacked to the edge. When the old man opened the door, he initially thought that Xiaoyan was the landlord promising the payment of the rent. However, when he saw it better and saw the boxes overflowing the corridor and spreading down the stairs, his confusion increased. But the protagonist promised an explanation later while they hurried to put the boxes in before the neighbors noticed. After a few minutes of work, mainly done by Xiaoyan, all the boxes were inside. The old man was surprised to see that Xiaoyan did not seem tired at all despite having made a lot of effort. In that the protagonist inspected the room and concluded that it would be a suitable emergency shelter due to the robustness of the main door. Then he instructed the old man to use the supplies carefully, as they should last approximately 6 months. Just as he was about to go into more detail, Xiaoyan noticed a photo in the room that surprised him. In the photo, the old man appeared proud next to his beautiful granddaughter. To Xiaoyan's surprise, the girl in the image was a close friend of him during the first apocalypse called Chan Chan, so he immediately asked the old man if the young woman in the photo was called Chan Chan, which confused the old man even more since he had never mentioned her name. Xiaoyan's expression became somber as he urgently asked the old man where the girl was, which he replied that she was still at school. While they were fixing the transfer of documents, Xiaoyan remembered how Chan Chan had expressed his regret for putting his grandfather in a difficult situation during the first days of the apocalypse. According to what he remembered, Chan Chan's grandfather had risked everything to save her. In that desolate timeline, the old man had bravely ventured into his zombie-infested school to save her, and although he managed to rescue her, he died in the process. Being a close ally of his previous life, Xiaoyan was determined to prevent Chan Chan from facing such suffering again. So he turned to the old man and informed him that the house was no longer for sale. The old man, concerned about this, thought that Xiaoyan was withdrawing from the agreement, but what followed was even more surprising. Xiaoyan explained to him that the world would become a real chaos the next day. The house at Chan Chan's school would no longer be relevant. Instead, it was urgent to move her to a safer place. This sudden statement left the old man even more confused, which the protag did not consider how difficult it would be for an old man to understand the apocalypse. Therefore, he used a simpler analogy, comparing the situation with a starvation, to give him an idea of the seriousness of the problem. Although the idea of a starvation was alarming, the old man thought that such things do not happen in times of peace. Since the words did not seem enough to convince the old man, Xiaoyan decided to show him instead of just talking, so he kept all the boxes and objects in his storage ring, leaving the room empty and spacious, a change that the old man found amazing. Xiaoyan claimed to have special skills and the ability to foresee the future, and asked the old man to trust him to be able to save Chan Chan. The next step was to get the girl out of school. As they headed to the place where Chan Chan was, the old man looked astonished at how Xiaoyan was driving in a fearful way, trying to get there as quickly as possible. Upon arrival they found Chan Chan in front of a department building, surrounded by other students. Some jealous girls were hitting her because a boy had taken an interest in her. Although Chan Chan insisted that she did not want to be with him and that she simply enjoyed attention, one of the girls kicked her in the stomach for defending herself. And all of them turned to attack her, envious of the attention that Chan Chan received for her beauty. The situation was intensifying rapidly when the old man's voice broke the chaos. Watching his granddaughter in such a distressing situation, they all turned their attention to the grandfather who was running towards his beloved granddaughter. The old man shouted at the young women out of control, demanding that they let Chan Chan go. But at that moment, a group of unattractive thugs got in their way, ordering the old man to step aside so that the girls could resolve the matter without interruption. The thugs displayed their weapons and knives in an intimidating way. However, the old man threw himself forward despite the threats, recriminating the thugs for their conduct. But immediately one of these raised his steel bat, pointing it at the old man's head. However, Xiaoyan intervened just in time, stopping the attack of this subject, and immediately looked at him with an overwhelming look, noticing that they were still learning the trade. Quickly the other two guys focused on Xiaoyan, thinking that perhaps he was Chan Chan's older brother or something like that, which made him an easy target. But the thug holding the bat could not move it, no matter how hard he tried. And without wasting time, Xiaoyan gave him a precise kick all over the mouth of the stomach, sending him through the air as if he had been shot from a cannon. Seeing what had happened to the first one, the other two hesitated for a moment. At first glance, Xiaoyan seemed to have training in combat, and they mentioned that maybe if they attacked as a team they could hit him, but Xiaoyan's cold and calculative gaze indicated that it would not be that easy. The plan of the thugs consisted of one with a knife in front and the other with a bat behind. The first to attack was the one with the bat, who jumped quickly, but the prota dodged the attack easily, his new body proving to be agile. After improving his physical abilities with potions, his reaction speed had also increased. So with his new strength he grabbed the thug who tried to hit him and threw him to the ground effortlessly. A single blow was enough for this guy to pass out, probably for hitting his head against the pavement. Meanwhile, the remaining man tried to attack him aggressively, but Xiaoyan deflected the weapon without moving and looked at him with determination. Maintaining visual contact, he prepared his leg and gave him a strong blow to the side of the leg, leaving him bent like an omelette. The fall ended with the blonde guy hitting the ground hard, and in seconds all of them were defeated. The only remaining problems were the girls who tormented Changsheng for no reason. As a defender of equality after his experience in the apocalypse, Xiaoyan slapped one of them, surprising the girl with a slap so strong that it made her tremble and reddened her cheek. As for the other bravado, as she liked to pull Changsheng's hair so much, Xiaoyan gave this woman a little of her own medicine and did not let her go no matter how much she begged. With a murderous look, he took out the razor he had gotten from the blonde man and put it against the neck of the girl. Scared by what he could do, she could not help but cry. Each spectator in the area heard a sharp cut and a heartbreaking scream, however Xiaoyan did not even blink. In the first apocalypse, he did many things for the good of survival, and those instincts remain with him. The ladies looked horrified at the result of what he had just done. The girl fell on her knees, since the prota had cut her hair and humiliated her in front of everyone. But even without learning the lesson, this woman screamed that she would not let Xiaoyan get out with hers after treating her that way. However, he did not pay attention to his empty threats while he looked at her with contempt, and immediately spread the strands of hair over his head for greater disrespect, and told him that he had done him a favor, since long hair would only be a burden in the apocalypse. Everyone was confused by his mysterious words, but he assured them that having short hair could save his life in the next few days. But leaving that aside, Xiaoyan returned to Changsheng with familiarity, telling her that they had to go now, even though she did not know where. Despite everything, the old man convinced his granddaughter to get in the prota's car immediately. While in the car, his grandfather told him that he would not return to school. With a look of madness in his eyes, the old man explained that a great famine was approaching and survival had to be his priority. However, Changsheng did not believe him. He thought that his grandfather had simply fallen into one of those fraudulent calls. Xiaoyan watched the two of them argue while the young woman was worried that her grandfather had just been swindled for some money. But the prota was relieved to see Changsheng safe and promised to protect her in her new life. Noticing that the words of her grandfather had no effect, he intervened and confessed that the information about the famine had been invented by him. And that is how Xiaoyan formally introduced herself, allowing Changsheng not to call her brother Xiaoyan. She thanked him for facing the bravado in school, and he promised him that those guys would not last long. She wondered if the famine was real, to which the prota admitted that he only invented it to convince his grandfather. Then he clarified that what is really approaching is the apocalypse, the end of modern civilization. Hearing such an extreme statement, Xiaoyan thought it was natural to feel crazy. He decided to check the news and the internet in search of signs of the end of the world. When taking out his phone, he saw a video in the foreground of a man, detained by the authorities at a train station, reciting sinister prophecies about the end of the days. Some people said it was rage and that the guy was biting other people, but the man seemed lucid enough to recite gloomy things about a fog with a strange smell. In the video, the detainee resisted being immobilized with enough strength to free himself and bite more people like a dog. It was almost total chaos from then on, as Xiaoyan had declared and expected. The initial signs of the apocalypse were already in full swing. Tomorrow would mark the first official day of the apocalypse, and a toxic fog would begin to cover several provinces, including Province B. All types of living beings will be affected by this unknown fog. There will come a point when a significant part of the population will mutate into mindless zombies that will wander the streets in search of their next prey. As for the other part that survives the fog, it will not get rid of the cruelty of those hungry meat zombies. After an agonizing death, the victim will become one of them. Shang-Chen is part of the new generation, so she should have a general idea of what zombies are like. She has some ideas based on movies and pop culture in general, but it is difficult to believe that it is really happening. But when the chaos officially begins tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, or the next week, everyone will not find the idea so incredible. Unfortunately, they were in the middle of traffic when the time was crucial to return to the headquarters. It was so bad that even the emergency lane was blocked and congested. The old man began to get nervous, as the protagonist had just mentioned the zombies and now they were in a static position. However, Xiao Zhan assured him that they should be safe for now, but although the zombies could not take over everything for a few days, the possibility of a small outbreak nearby was not impossible. While the traffic was stopped, suddenly a luxury car used the emergency lane to overtake everyone, and when the movement resumed, it abruptly cut off Xiao Zhan, who had to brake to avoid a crash. The protagonist was furious because the reckless driver did not respect the turn signals and put everyone in danger by using the emergency lane irresponsibly. Both vehicles were trapped in the same traffic jam, and the driver of the luxury car, instead of calming down, stopped next to Xiao Zhan's window and began to curse him very furiously. In that, the old man suggested avoiding problems with the reckless driver, who seemed wealthy and powerful, but Xiao Zhan was not willing to give in. For almost an hour in the traffic, Xiao Zhan was determined to face the driver if he caused more problems. When the traffic finally cleared, the luxury car tried to get ahead again, indicating that the problems had not finished and was chasing them deliberately. The protagonist was really starting to get angry now, since this rich Mikoso simply did not let him go. If it were this subject, he was surely an uncontrolled person who put his life and his vehicle at risk just to be annoying on the road. He was bothering them and deliberately provoking them, to which the old man insisted to simply let him pass and not get involved anymore. Sincerely, the Xiao Zhan of the past could have let that subject pass, but the apocalypse is tomorrow. There would no longer be a need to tolerate garbage like that rich Mikoso. So the protagonist played with the aggressive driver a little. He bet that the guy would be cowardly at the last moment, and he won, since that guy almost crashed into the nearby hill, but he had the audacity to handle the situation. That very angry man immediately called the traffic police to request surveillance recordings. He wanted to track Xiao Zhan to show that important people should not be bothered. Meanwhile, when the three arrived at the site, it was already night. As soon as they got out of the car, the old man looked at the complex with his mouth open, surprised by its size. While Chang commented that the whole place seemed a bit excessive. However, Xiao Zhan told the two of them to just rest, since from tomorrow everything they believed would turn upside down. And despite what he said, our protagonist seemed quite relaxed and comfortable in front of his observation terrace with a coffee in his hand. At the first hour of the morning, Chang had just woken up and found Xiao Zhan nearby. It had been so long since I had a good night's sleep, and not having classes in the morning was a liberating feeling. As he was already awake, it would be an excellent time to give him a tour of the fortress. They looked for the grandfather, and Xiao Zhan showed them the facilities, highlighting that all the walls were reinforced concrete and the doors made of solid steel 3 centimeters thick and remotely controlled. They would even resist heavy armament. Keeping any intruder outside, whether they were people or zombies, would be easy. Xiao Zhan also warned that no one other than the three of them would have access to the fortress without his permission. Upon hearing this, Chang understood that Xiao Zhan allowed other survivors to die outside with the zombies. However, the proton did not respond directly but took them elsewhere. He explained that with the apocalypse, human nature would become even more unpredictable and evil, and people would magnify without laws. He warned that compassion could lead them to be murdered, and showed them a place that he had built to protect himself. It looked like a complex of apartments locked up with multiple containers of cargo scattered around, and he told them that in case he was not present and the survivors came looking for help, they could be accommodated in this cushioning area as a temporary refuge. But he made it clear that the prohibition of other people in the main fortress was still in place without his permission, which the old man agreed with him. The next stop on the tour would be the food storage. He would also show them that areas of his supply place could be rationed to other people. Upon entering the warehouse full of piles and piles of essential supplies, it seemed an absurd vision. In that, Xiao Zhan turned around, looking at them with intention. He proceeded to activate the Eye of the Mind to check their status of hostility, which did not show any sign of malice. After showing them the goods, fortunately he saw happy faces on their heads, so he thought he should be sure to assume that this was a sign of confidence. So he continued with the next exhibition from his storage ring. While explaining that weapons were the most important thing in this apocalypse, he gave Xiao Zhan a crossbow and the old man a shotgun. He reminded them of the importance of maintaining control over those weapons and preventing them from falling into wrong hands. It was a matter of common sense. Guaranteeing the safety of the weapons was crucial to avoid chaos. But suddenly in that Xiao Zhan received a notification from the system about a new task. After meeting with Chan Chan, another mission was assigned to him. Now he had to find an old acquaintance named Sanji. This news surprised Xiao Zhan, who when looking at the city from the observation terrace, he shot an arrow that marked Sanji's location. Since he was already planning to meet old friends, this seemed like an excellent opportunity. But before leaving to complete his mission, he reminded the grandfather and granddaughter that they had to follow the rules and not consider breaking them. When they asked him where he was going, he got into his car and explained that he was going to recruit and form a team. The large arrow indicating Sanji's location seems to point to a bar called KTV, which within its facilities a group of friends was enjoying, drinking and singing karaoke. In that, Sanji, a little dazed, left the room with a friend to go to the bathroom. After doing their morning necessities, they both wandered down the hall to continue enjoying the party. Sanji was so drunk that he accidentally collided with a girl who was quite annoying. Although he apologized for this, the girl's bodyguard called him a fool and attacked him without hesitation, which caused Sanji to crash against the wall, and his friend, worried about his state, quickly approached him to see how he was doing. And immediately Sanji's friend confronted the thug, demanding him stop being violent. Annoyed by the confrontation, especially in front of the girl, that guy got angry and lifted Sanji's friend by the neck with great force. Seeing that the situation was getting dangerous, Sanji tried to get up, admitted his mistake and asked the thug not to hurt his friend. But fortunately a member of the establishment staff, still recovering from a cold, noticed the fight. Since the fights were common in the bar due to drunk customers, he decided to intervene to calm the mood and asked both groups to calm down. However, the thug, offended by the interruption, considered this a lack of respect, since not even the owner of the establishment would dare to touch his clothes. And now the employee became the target of the anger of that guy, and without hesitation he made a gesture to Sanji and his friend to leave quickly. In that the thug demanded the immediate presence of the head of the bar or threatened to close the place. And despite the fact that this employee tried to soften the situation, it was not successful. While the boys from the university ran back to the karaoke room 3090 as if they were fleeing from a wild animal. In that his friends, logically curious about what had happened, they were worried about their states. Basically they had had a confrontation with a drunk thug who had threatened them. And they began to tell that they were lucky that one of the employees acted quickly to calm the situation. One of his friends suggested that they should have fought, arguing that his class of mechanical engineering should never give up. He wanted to call other colleagues from his department to take retaliation. But immediately Sanji stopped him, arguing that acting impulsively and looking for problems in less than a year of graduation would be a very stupid decision. And he mentioned that they should continue singing, dancing and celebrating. But suddenly in that the drunk thug appeared with all his group to seek retaliation. It seemed that they had hit the employee to find the room 3090. The boys were naturally surprised that a group of unknown thugs had just broken into their private room. But immediately the drunk thug threw the employee like a rag doll and pointed to Sanji and his friends, telling his men to grab everyone. The boys from the university did not dare to resist out of fear that the violence would escalate even more, so they surrendered without further options. Seeing the fate of the hit employee made them shudder, thinking that they would also end up that way. But in that the mechanical engineering thug challenged the thugs, challenging them to allow him to make a call. However, in response, that guy grabbed a bottle and crashed it all over his head. And that's how the blood of the Durachank type mixed with the liquor as it flowed to the ground, which worried Sanji a lot. Meanwhile, Ajin arrived in his car from Barsha and was excited to meet an old friend from the first apocalypse. He had fun how this place looks like the university version of Sanchai. But without wasting any more time, he entered the place received by the staff, remembering how despite the chaos of the world, his friend had always maintained his passion for singing. Meanwhile inside the premises, Sanchai sees how his friend is lying on the floor after being hit in the head. The thug asks his girlfriend if, after what he has done, she feels satisfied. She tells him that he cannot be at all, because it was not he who stumbled upon her, but it was Sanchai. Then the thug points out to proceed to hurt him as well, but Cenk gets up from the very furious ground and grabs the ashtray to attack him in response for having hurt him. However, he is detained by two of his henchmen who hold him by the arms. The leader of the thugs approaches and, disgusted, tells him that he did not think he had so many guts to do that. and right away he breaks a bottle of glass in his head again, leaving him completely knocked to the ground. In that, Sanchi and his friend who observed the whole situation finally decide to strike the thugs, except for one of them who is cornered in a very frightened corner. The group of bad guys decide to beat them to death for rebelling and walking in response, but in the midst of chaos the karaoke employee gets up from the ground and starts coughing. He watches the fight that has formed, but strangely his eyes have turned red and he has a different appearance, in that he quickly swings and bites one of the thugs right on the shoulder. He asks him if he has a dog complex and asks his companions for help to take it off. In the midst of the panic, one of the other thugs decides to try to take it off, but he cannot and wonders how he is so strong. Then the employee turns around and proceeds to bite him also in the arm, knocking him to the ground while he confirms that he has inhuman strength. In that comes our prota, who holds the wild employee by the neck with little effort and stamps his head against the TV, ordering everyone in the room to stop fighting. Everyone is surprised, so much so that the thug who was bitten in the arm is shocked by his great strength when he sees a young man in charge of the neck with a single hand. The leader of the thugs asks the prota who he is, but he ignores him and asks his friend Sanche if he has been bitten, to which he tells him no. Upon hearing this, Sioyan asks him to go with him, but again the thug leader holds him by the shoulder, recriminating him that they have not yet finished settling accounts. In that he turns around because he sees that one of his henchmen is tossing on the floor, telling him that his head is spinning and he feels very dizzy, to which he asks him if his breathing has worsened. In that, Sioyan starts to observe his shoulder, realizing that he has a bite, so he asks him if he has been bitten by the employee, and he affirms that he was. He quickly realizes that judging by what he says, it is most likely that he is already infected, and even worse with a bite, so close to the brain it will be a matter of time for it to transform. Soon, the prota who still has the infected employee holding him, throws him into a room and closes the door, because luckily zombies are so stupid that they still do not know how to open doors. After this he directly asks Sanche which one he wants to dispatch for him, and this somewhat confused one asks him if they know each other. To which the leader of the thugs gets upset for wanting to sound arrogant and decides to go hit him. But Sioyan quickly grabs him by the face and with incredible force he stamps his head against the ground. On the other side comes one of his henchmen to try to attack him. The prota ends up dispatching him with a good blow to the face, knocking him out instantly. The last henchman who remains is close to his partner because he cannot believe that with a single blow he has left him out of combat. In that, Sioyan asks everyone if there is anyone else who is not convinced of his strength to come and test his fists. Then he orders Sanchi to take his friend with him and wait for him outside. Then the group of friends leave the karaoke room, and behind them also the group of thugs. But the prota stands in front of them, obstructing him, and tells the leader of the group that he has gotten so drunk that he forgot his own name and almost causes his friend to be killed. He does not know what he is talking about and asks him to move away from his path, but Sioyan does not push and decides to lock them up with his group inside the room. Finally, one of his henchmen who was bitten becomes a zombie and proceeds to bite him. In that, another karaoke employee arrives at the scene and asks the prota what is happening and if he needs help, to which he tells him to close this door immediately with a key because no one is allowed to enter. After he contacts the police and the hospital and tells them that there is a patient with rabies in the room, the employee hearing this is somewhat confused, but the prota shouts at him to do it. While they leave the place, the employee feels intrigued by what is inside because there is a lot of noise. One of his companions arrives and asks him what the commotion is, to which he explains that one of the clients said that there is someone with rabies inside the room, so to kill the curiosity the two decide to go to check the security cameras once they have arrived. A look of disturbance and fear invades their faces when they see the images where everyone has been bitten and turned into zombies, to which they urgently ask to call the police. The prota who is out of place asks them to hurry because the area is no longer safe. Then they get in their vehicle and escape from the place. In that, Sanchai who now confidently tells him brother, thanks for helping them, and asks for his name. The prota identifies himself to the group, commenting that he was hired to protect them, and they do not need to know who hired him. One of the boys asks him if that rabies disease he is talking about is real, because he understands that it was denied on the internet, saying that it does not exist. He asks him if perhaps what he witnessed in the karaoke a few minutes ago was an illusion. Another asks him if there is any medicine that can cure it. But in the words of the prota, all this disaster has no end and will only get worse from now on because the world is now in apocalypse. While they are in the car, they witness how on the outside the situation has changed chaotically and the infected are attacking civilians. The current situation is just a small outbreak that has occurred in specific areas and most of the people are still in an incubation phase, so very soon everything will be out of control on a massive scale. So the prota tells the boys that if they want to survive, From now on they must listen and do everything he says. In that the message of the system appears, notifying him that the mission has been completed and has earned 20 points, so Zioyan decides to see what are the new rewards in the store. Upon reviewing he realized that now there are 3 new boxes. One of them is the apocalyptic farm box, which needs to be bought or spent points manually. All these boxes look useful and do not look very expensive, so once he gets back to the fortress he will exchange them all. However, there is still a problem. At that moment the Proto remembers how in his past life the roommate of Sanche betrayed him, causing many others to die in the hands of the zombies, and Sanche was the only one who could barely survive such an incident. Being seen as the culprit that everyone has died, this is why our Proto wonders who of the 3 boys who were with him in the car will have been the true traitor. Changing scenes. Kinji is calling his lover, asking him when he will bring the supplies he promised because things are getting very dangerous outside. And he is very afraid to go out to the store on his own, to which he tells him that he will soon take them, but right now he has to deal with something fast. At that moment she hears someone knocking on the door very loudly, so she tells him that he is going to hang to see who it is. Then he proceeds to check the mirror and is relieved because it is his girlfriend. This notifies him that Grandpa Liu from the first floor was transferred to another place during the morning. Apparently a police car and an ambulance took him suddenly. In that Kinji thinks that explains why there was so much commotion in the morning. On the other hand, Chuya comments that apparently the rage that everyone is talking about is not just a tactic to scare people, so she asks him if Lichuanga has made the delivery of the supplies that he promised. However, she tells him that he has not done it yet, to which she recriminates him that he cannot trust men. In that he asks him to call him and tell him that Zioang has a large supply reserve, which is more than enough to make a fortune during the epidemic. In that Kinji asks him how he knows this information, to which she replies that the last time she was thrown out of Zioang's property, he sent one of his lackeys to spy on him in secret, revealing that there are trucks that regularly deliver supplies to the abandoned factory that he has under his property, so they deduce that the safest thing is that he has realized the epidemic long before. In that Chuya tells him that there is nothing wrong, because Lichuanga already knew that too, so he tells Kinji to trust her, and call him to make the business as soon as possible and take advantage of obtaining a better profit from supplies. Once they arrive at the refuge, they get out of the car and Sanche with a surprised attitude, thinks that the place is quite incredible because it looks like a fortress, to which the Proto replies that in effect that is something that everyone says the first time they see it. Suddenly Grandpa and Chanchin receive us, and the Proto proceeds to introduce the new members of the team who will accompany them from now on. After making the formalities, he asks Grandpa to take the boys and show them the surroundings of the place, in addition to explaining the rules and regulations that they must follow. In that one of the friends, who is called Jimin, asks Xiao Zhang to please make him an attribution of some weapons, since with that they can also contribute to defending the place. However, one of his companions realizing his imprudence tells him not to be so impatient to ask for something like that, because they have just moved to the place and need to gain his trust first. But Xiao Zhang calmly tells him that after a few days they will receive their own weapons, so there is no need to despair. For now the priority would be to check on his other friend who is seriously injured and must be taken to the medical room. After a little while the group of boys is already installed in the shelter and feel very comfortable with the stay, but in that Jimin asks his friend Fourth to explain why he got into his previous proposal, since if he had not done so for sure he could have gotten weapons to defend himself. He also thinks that given the current situation, in the best case they could be being protected from the imminent apocalypse, or in the worst case they would be being kidnapped in the house right now. In that room he looks at him with disapproval, arguing that he does not express himself in that way to someone who had just saved them from a beating. In that Jimin asks what relevant information they have of him now, to which Sanche responds, reminding him that the protagonist had mentioned in the car that someone hired him to save them. However, Jimin, who seems to still not be satisfied with the situation, begins to notice something insecure and tells them that that story of who hired him for sure is a complete farce, so he doubts that he is even telling them the truth. He is also not so sure how they are treating Chin, indicating that the fourth doctor to whom they sent him seems like a prison, and they could even be taking out his organs there. So with a determined look he proposes that they attack first. In that room he thinks that they could also be wrong if they come to a conclusion like that, because that would mean that they would be betraying the person who saved him. However, Jimin with a determined look tells him that he would rather betray the world than let the world betray him. So even if Xiaoyan tells the truth, they will equally take control of the fortress on their own and establish their leadership. Then with some malice in his voice he thinks that in addition to Xiaoyan there is only an old man and a young girl in the place, so while the protagonist is away they could take the opportunity to capture the old man and his granddaughter. Then he comments that she, referring to Chan Chan, is a girl who looks very attractive and perhaps they could do something to her about it, leaving a disturbing aura. This makes Sanche and Kyoardo perplexed by his words and uncomfortable by what he has just insinuated. But Jimin breaks the atmosphere by laughing and telling them to relax, because he was only joking with them. Sanche suddenly sighs, commenting that what he heard was a scare, and that the apocalypse had not even started, and he was already thinking about perverse and illegal things. After the two friends leave, Jimin looks at us with a somewhat cynical look while he thinks that in chaotic times one must be someone without mercy. And he assures that once his plans are successful he will turn his two friends into lackeys of his evil wishes. Meanwhile, the grandfather and Chan Chan approach the protagonist with the objective of warning them that their friends have already been treated and guided to their rooms, and that the one who was quite badly injured is already resting in the medical room. This is how the protagonist thanks him for having taken care of everything as it was sent to him, and asks them to take a well-deserved rest because who knows what may happen tomorrow. But before they leave, he quickly reminds them to keep an eye on both Sanche's companions, since he has the feeling that there is a hidden traitor among them. At night, Seoyeon is only in the refuge warehouses and proceeds to review the items in the store, specifically the boxes he obtained during the missions. Without further delay he begins to open them at the same time, and a large loot appears in front of his eyes. This makes him think that these rewards look quite decent, however it is not as good as spending money freely today. So once the apocalypse begins and the resources of the world gradually decrease, these boxes will obtain an incalculable value. The night has already passed, and the next day, the sound of several cars reverberates throughout the environment, specifically 3 cars which are positioned right at the entrance of the refuge of our protagonist. In that the subject who had a problem with Seoyeon on the road that other day, because he had been very upset and resentful for having gotten involved with him. Next to him are numerous bandits who he has probably hired, and orders them to start forcing the entrance to the house in a very aggressive way. Seeing that it is costing them a lot to open it, one of the thugs tells him that it seems that said door is made of a very strong and thick material, so with the weapons they have they do not believe that it is possible to force it to open. In that the boss who hired them begins to lower their patience and quickly orders them to bring the heavy armor. Suddenly one of them pulls out a trunk full of Molotov bottles, and in that everyone begins to throw them into the house, overpassing the metal door and setting the place on fire. Faced with the fire and chaos that was forming, Chan Chan goes out with Sanchi and the boys to quickly extinguish the fire. In that she thinks that the protagonist was right, that the apocalypse has not even started properly and already numerous extreme things are happening. On the other hand, Seoyeon and the grandfather, equipped with rifles, approach to climb up to the lookout of the refuge to check who are the ones who are looking for problems. Once they are upstairs, the grandfather quickly realizes that it is the subject with whom Seoyeon had an altercation on the road. In that below, one of the thugs realizes that they are being observed and warns the boss, but this one with a pretentious and aggressive voice insults him, telling him to get down and that otherwise they will burn the whole house. Seoyeon looks at him very seriously and warns them to leave the place, he and his lackeys, or otherwise something bad will happen to them. Suddenly the whole group of thugs, upon hearing the threat, become very hysterical and order to bring another trunk full of Molotov to continue with the attack. In that Seoyeon, a new notification of the system appears, indicating that a new mission has been submitted. Suddenly the grandfather, who feels a little nervous, asks him if they should shoot in the air as a warning signal, but the protagonist does not seem to be comfortable with this, since the new mission that has been entrusted to him is nothing more and nothing less than to eliminate any possible threat and safeguard the refuge as it should be. This is why with a calm voice he tells the grandfather that a few simple warning shots will be of no use at all, because those people are clearly thugs of society, so much so that they did not think twice and caused a fire in the place, no matter if innocent people could die. This is how by pointing his rifle he makes it clear to the grandfather that leaving these human scum alive during the apocalypse will only bring them problems in the future and even hurt innocent people. Without thinking twice he squeezes the trigger of the rifle, and from a shot he brutally blows his arm to the boss of the thugs, making him scream in pain and shocking everyone in the act. To which Seoyeon thinks that his shot failed because apparently he had planned to hit him elsewhere, and that having lived for a few months peacefully has made him rust a little. The boss and all his lackeys quickly decide to withdraw from the place because they had not planned for the protagonist to have weapons, but Seoyeon with a cold and ruthless attitude tells them that he hates people who never finish what they start, and without thinking twice, with a squeeze of the trigger he discharges numerous shots at them, brutally eliminating them. In that the terrified boss manages to get in the vehicle and asks them to quickly step on the accelerator to leave the place. However, Seoyeon already had this planned and changes his weapon to an automatic rifle, then discharges A series of bullets with such speed and precision that leaves the grandfather totally impressed. Once all the thugs have been eliminated, the protagonist orders the grandfather to call Sanchi and the others to go clean the place, but in that he decides to change his mind because he believes that they are still in the early stages of the apocalypse, and believes that it is better to let the corpses become zombies to use them as training for Sanchi and the others. Meanwhile, Lichuang is in the car and asks Chuya if they are already near Xiaoyan's refuge. She tells him with a very affectionate attitude that they are about to arrive. In that, Kinji notices how his friend acts in front of Lichuang, making him see that he always behaves like that with him and letting him see that he wants to compete to take away his lover. Once they arrive at the place, Kinji tells his friend to accompany her, but she does not seem to want to do so, so she ends up forcing her to get her out of the car and ordering her to stop making excuses and complaints. Then Lichuang warns the bandits that he hired to be attentive to loot once they get the signal. While the two girls walk talking, they realize that something has happened ahead. Suddenly they are impressed to see that the road to the entrance is full of corpses. This makes them think that other thugs have already come to loot Xiaoyan's supplies. And with an expectant attitude they think that he is most likely already dead. However, while the two draw their conclusions, behind one of the bodies turning into a zombie, he watches them with threat. Once the two girls reach the door, they realize that it is made of a strong steel which does not allow them to see absolutely anything. Suddenly Chang Sheng, who is watching them from the viewpoint, demands that they tell him who they are and how they were able to find the place. In that they tell them that they are known to the protagonist, and Kinji mentions that she is his girlfriend. This is how Chang Sheng immediately notifies Xiaoyan the message. But Kinji cannot help but feel upset when he finds out how he has a new girlfriend, which is cool to see her that way. He tells her not to show any sign of being upset and to focus on the mission. He also mentions that Chang Sheng has a crossbow, so he asks him if Lichuang will be able to defeat them. But Kinji, still somewhat annoyed, tells him not to worry since he brought a few firearms, so once they open the door they will be able to eliminate the protagonist. In that, Xiaoyan arrives, who asks them what they are doing at home and without thinking twice, activates his mind's eye to review the mood of the two. This allows him to realize that although the two are pretending to be friendly, deep down they are furious and have bad intentions. Xiaoyan tells them that he doubts that they are there to worry about him, and that the scum of Lichuang must be somewhere hidden, so he orders them to tell them how many thugs he brought and what weapons they brought. Suddenly the two girls are impressed because they had not expected him to know something like that, and immediately a series of shots roll very close to them, dealing with Xiaoyan, who with a cold and calculating look has opened fire at them. In the face of the commotion, Lichuang tells his friend to stop provoking him because he loads firearms. But Kinji, somewhat furious, tells him that he does not have to fear because he does not believe that the protagonist has the guts to eliminate her. In that, Xiaoyan with a confident smile clarifies that he does not intend to get rid of them in such a quick way as that, since it seems to him that it is an easy death. Suddenly the two turn around and realize that behind their backs a horde of zombies have come to eat them. Quickly Xiaoyan's face turns into a mixture of pleasure and revenge, telling them that he wants them to die slowly under the clutches of the zombies. In the midst of the panic, the two girls begin to flee the place, running with all their strength, so as not to be devoured, and in full despair Kinji shouts at Lichuang to save her. But this fearful fat man just has to give the order to flee the place, leaving them completely to his luck. And suddenly Kinji, very desperate, decides to throw her bag towards her friend Chuya, making her trip and fall to the ground. As expected, she ends up being devoured by the zombies after being betrayed, but while she is making food she insults her friend, making it clear that she will not have a nice death once her time comes. And Kinji, after eliminating her to save her skin, shouts at her from afar that that is what she deserves. Suddenly a notification comes out to the system's protagonist, giving to understand that what he did was also to complete a mission, thus earning 10 points, and granting him another mission, which is to clear the area outside the refuge. In that, Chan Chan comments that those thugs who died before had turned into zombies out of nowhere, so Xiaoyan thinks that this is really the beginning of the apocalypse, because apparently the air is already contaminated by alien infection. This causes people who were dead to be exposed to the air from outside to mutate quickly into zombies. Even those who are injured or have weak bodies also have a high risk of mutation. After this he asks Chan Chan to call everyone because they are going to hold a small conference, and once everyone is gathered he orders each one to be guarded within the refuge for the next 2 days. He also asks them to keep the windows closed and let their bodies gradually adapt to the infection, as this will help them greatly reduce the risk of mutation. However, it seems that Chan, the partner who was badly wounded and resting, is slowly succumbing to the virus. The city has become a complete chaos. That is what Sang says while watching from his window. After this he tells his wife that he has to go to the warehouse tonight and bring the remaining supplies that remain. That is why he tells her and her son to stay at home, and no matter what happens they will never open the door to anyone unless it is him. But as he finishes these words, just at his door someone is knocking hard, so he tells his daughter and his wife to remain silent, grabbing a golf club and heading to open the door. This one, hearing the voice, realizes that it is his partner Yantao, so he calms down for a moment, but suddenly when opening it Yantao gives him a hard kick in the stomach that knocks him to the ground, and immediately his men proceed to apprehend him. Visibly desperate, he asks him to order his men to release him and asks him what he is up to since he has treated him very well, but Yantao tells him that it does not seem as if he had treated him well, since in his safe eyes he only sees him as one more scoundrel. He also emphasizes that he has a little conscience, since if it were not for him he could never have been able to save to buy that house he has. Yantao complains that he made little money for the houses while Zhang earned a lot with the sale of other properties. So after so much nonsense, he demands Zhang with a threatening tone to give him the keys to the deposit as well as the address of the place, but he does not respond in a sign that he is resisting. So Yantao cruelly goes to his wife and holds her tightly by the hair, hurting her. In that his son gets angry and tells him to let her go, biting Yantao's arm, but he in a ruthless act gives him a slap that sends the boy to the floor. In that Zhang tells him that if he has so many agas come to him, but leave his wife and son alone, to which Yantao tells him that there is no problem because as soon as he decides to cooperate both his wife and son will be safe. Without anything else to do, Zhang takes them to him and his men to the supply depot, but Yantao, somewhat doubtful, asks him if these are the only boxes of supplies that remain. In that Zhang replies that he was the one who found those great customers from before, and that is why almost all the supplies are already sold, even the food that is about to expire is almost finished. This makes Yantao think about Xiao Zhan, because he was responsible for having bought many boxes before, so he gets the idea that if they go and loot the supplies that he has stored in his factory then they would have reserves for life. However, Zhang warns him that he better stay away from him, because the other day when he was making some orders he realized that he was carrying a weapon with him, so somehow he has managed to make his way through all the chaos in the city, and already has a lot of advantage, but Yantao tells him that this is not a problem since he will be the one who has to deal with him. Faced with this, Zhang is intrigued and asks him what it is about, to which Yantao orders him that he will be the one in charge of stealing Xiao Zhan's supplies, because only in this way he will be able to have his wife and son safe again, shamelessly blackmailing him. Changing the scene, the Prota and the other boys are in the medical room, seeing the serious state in which Chong is, who has already mutated almost into a zombie and is roaring like crazy. In the face of that, but he is left looking at something strange and in silence. In that Sanche, who is affected, asks him what he is saying, but Jimin is still clinging to the idea that he is already practically dead, and not taking care of eliminating him now could somehow get rid of himself and put everyone's lives at risk. In that Zio Kai recriminates him that he is a friend almost like his brother, and that they cannot simply surrender and let him die without even trying something. However, the Prota intervenes saying that Jimin is right, because once he becomes a zombie, there is practically no possibility that he can recover. Immediately he takes out a knife from his pocket and gives it to Jimin, telling him to use it. He is a little nervous and comments on why he is giving it to him, but the Prota simply tells him to use it to eliminate his friend Chong, claiming that he always wanted a weapon, so now that he has it he must use it to put an end to the misery and suffering of his partner. However, in the middle of this Sanche approaches and tells Zhao Yang to better give him the weapon because he will be in charge of doing it. Before the request that Sanche is making to him, the Prota tells him if he is sure he can do this, and asks him what would happen if he were lying, since once he kills him he would then turn him into a murderer. However, Sanche tells him that it does not matter, because he fully trusts the Prota, to which Zhao Yang with a smile on his face tells him to go and do it. This is how Sanche approaches something, nervous for having to do something like this, but he has enough guts and without thinking much he decides to stab the knife and finish everything at once. However, the Prota holds his arm just before he eliminates him, telling him that this time they will go away since his case is special and still has something to do with him. All this while he has a notification from the system that a rare mutation variant has been discovered. Once all the boys leave the room, the Prota stares at Chong, already mutated into a zombie, and tells him that he has an important task for him. Changing scenes, Sanche is frenetically driving until he reaches the Prota's refuge, in that a zombie approaches him to attack him and with great speed manages to bite him in his left arm. In the midst of despair he pushes him and runs towards his car to grab the golf club and eliminate him by hitting him several times until he is ground. Then he says that this place is a complete chaos and that he should not neglect himself while he continues to rummage through the area. On the other hand, the Prota is with his group leaving the fortress armed and equipped. In that, Changshan tells him that with all the things he has on and the equipment on his body he feels uncomfortable and slow, but he emphasizes that zombies do not have any kind of rationality, and that their energy and explosive force is more powerful than that of a regular human, which makes them quite dangerous. In addition, given the combat skills that she has now, he tells her that the best thing would be that before she is injured she better use equipment that protects her body, since once she gains much more combat experience, she will be able to remove it to feel more light. After this, he warns everyone to prepare because they are already within the range of perception of the zombies, in that a zombie already notices their presence and approaches to attack them. Suddenly Xiao Shan tells everyone to remember what he taught them and take care of each other's backs as well as maintaining the distance. All this while dodging the zombie to be able to use it as an example and learn. He mentions that the moment when the attack of a zombie is satisfactorily dodged, that is the perfect time to attack it, so in a precise and quick way they must aim either at the temple or the back of their neck. In that, Xiao Kai proceeds to attack the zombie, but ends up hitting him in the central part of his skull, causing him to tumble all over his arm and cause him pain. The Prota tells everyone that the skull is the hardest and softest part of the head. In addition to not receiving so much damage, it will only cause his hands to numb, pointing out that what Xiao Kai has just done is the perfect example of what should not be done. Then the zombie forcefully leans towards but Xiao Kai manages to block him satisfactorily with the machete while asking for help, so that someone saves him. However, the Prota, who is being a teacher, praises Xiao Kai's good defense and reaction and immediately asks Sanshi to act and save his comrade. This with great speed he positions himself on the back of the zombie and with his bat he tips him a strong blow to the neck, which leaves him on the floor, and that is how everyone takes the opportunity to attack him in unison. After having defeated him satisfactorily, Sanshi turns towards Xiao Shan to ask him how they did it this time, but he quickly realizes that there is a zombie behind him about to attack him. At that moment Xiao Shan, without even moving a bit, holds him with ease by the face while he continues to teach his companions lessons that they do not forget what he told them about never, but for nothing in the world they can lower their guard when it comes to observing the surroundings. This great skill and experience of our Prota leaves the entire group impressed by how skillful and confident he is in this type of situation. On the other hand, Senga is still prowling the area, and seeing the large number of zombies there, he wonders if Xiao Zhan is still alive. Suddenly he hears the sound of the voices of all the boys in the distance, and realizes that it is Xiao Zhan's voice. He quickly approaches and hides next to the truck with curiosity, realizing that the whole group is there hunting zombies, but he does not realize that under the vehicle the mutated body of Chuya is dragging towards him, and quickly holds his leg, making him fall to the ground. This makes him panic when he sees how he is about to be devoured. Just when the zombie was about to attack Sang, the Prota appeared out of nowhere and ended up eliminating him with his rifle. After saving him he looked at him seriously, and asked him what he was doing here, which Sang, still surprised by being alive, could hardly believe it. However, the attention of the Prota soon deviated towards Sang's left arm, where he noticed a bite mark. In that, Xiao Zhan did not hesitate to raise his weapon, pointing firmly, but Sang, visibly nervous, asked him not to do it because he had something important to confess to him. Sang admitted that he was infected and that he did not have much time before becoming a mutant. However, before succumbing to his fate, he revealed that Yantao, who he called a despicable human being, had kidnapped his wife and son and used them as hostages, blackmailing him to sabotage Xiao Zhan and seize his resources. With a broken voice, Sang confessed that although he was not a nobleman, he did not believe he had done something unforgivable, and his family, on the other hand, was innocent, and he knew that Yantao's henchmen would not spare their lives, so he very desperately begged Xiao Zhan to take care of them as payment for the help he had given him in the past. Suddenly Xiao Zhan in silence reflected, because despite the fact that Sang had also sought his own benefit, he could not deny that at the time he had been of great help. Then he looked around, evaluating the fortress that still had capacity for more people, although it was unbalanced with more men than women. Suddenly a message from the system appeared in front of him with a new mission, which was to rescue Sang's wife and son, and then that other task was also activated, which was to clear the zombies that roamed the area. After reading the messages, Xiao Shan went to Sang, assuring him that he would take care of his family. He, when he heard this, knelt down before the very grateful, and with tears in his eyes he told him that he could never pay him in this life, but in the next one he would be his very loyal servant. Then in a serious tone he asked him to end his life before transforming, but Xiao Zhan, somewhat disconcerted, looked at him in silence, and instead of fulfilling the request he gave an order to Chan Chan to bring a bicycle from the warehouse. With this he told Sang to go away to a desolate place where he would not put anyone at risk. In that, stunned Sang asked him why he was doing this, but Xiao Shan was sharp and told him that He did not have time for explanations because he simply had to do it. With a certain resignation, Sang obeyed, and got on the bicycle and left while the tears were still sprouting when he thought of his wife and son. Meanwhile, Xiao Zhan began to gather the corpses of the zombies, sprinkling them with gasoline. Then he lit a lighter and set them on fire, fulfilling one of the tasks of the system. Then he went to the group declaring that some were already able to defeat a zombie with body-to-body weapons without receiving damage, but he warned that they were not yet ready to face hordes. After this brief chat, he ordered the group to follow him. Before leaving, Xiao Zhan entrusted the grandfather with the key to the weapons warehouse, as he planned to head to the city that night and the security of the refuge would be in his hands. Worried, the grandfather asked him if he would really go, just knowing that the city was a chaos, but suddenly Sanchi appeared with the rest of the group offering to accompany him, but Xiao Zhan told them that it was not necessary because he did not want to endanger their lives and they would also be nothing more than a load. Soon Xiao Zhan got into his vehicle equipped with several weapons. While checking the system store, he looked somewhat desperate to notice how slow the store update was, and although the mission seemed difficult, he decided to refresh the catalog. In that 3 new articles appeared, but the cost of updating the store was increasing. However, the objects were worth it, so he undoubtedly exchanged his points for a box that contained a serum capable of improving physical strength, and without thinking much he injected it and felt how his body began to strengthen. Meanwhile, at Sang's house, his wife and son were still kidnapped. She tried to reassure her son, promising him that his father would rescue them soon. However, their hopes faded when the door opened suddenly. In that, Xiao Zhan and his henchmen entered with perverse looks and bad intentions, claiming that they wanted to have fun for a while. However, another of Xiao Zhan's henchmen arrives in the room, who asks them why they make so much noise. One of them tells him to come and join the party, but he tells him that the work has not yet been finished and they are already thinking of doing that kind of things, so he asks them to let her go. He argues that if they mess with his wife and son now, she could become depressive and try to end her life. In this way he would make her husband go crazy against them, and no one would win in this situation. So after they get rid of her husband, they can do whatever they want with her wife, so much so that she will never have a day off. Once this is said, Xiao Zhan leaves the place along with his henchmen with a face full of malice and shamelessness, leaving Zheng's wife very emotional. Changing scene, the protagonist is driving with total tranquility, thinking that the 13 points that have been raised in his physical strength are double that of what a normal person has. Even his reaction and control have improved significantly, and this feeling makes him feel very great. After this, he gets out of the car thinking that the city is ahead and mentions that if he continues to drive it will be very obvious, so he will choose to walk. However, next to him he hears the roar of the zombies that approach him, but this one with an inhuman ability dispatches them both in a single movement. Then he invokes his machete and proceeds to swing at them, slashing them in a 2x3. After this, he thinks that this is strength or reaction speed. These improvements outweigh any current zombie. It is practically to have the physical double of a normal person. He is also glad that his sense of perception has also improved significantly. This makes him realize that approximately at 800 meters he hears the voices of civilians, and suddenly in that a system message tells him that there is a new task which he must fulfill. Changing scene. Inside the city there is a group of humans who are inside a store resisting the horde of zombies. In that, a boy asks his father if they are going to die here, but he tells him to calm down because they will find a way to get out alive and meet his mother. However, this causes his son to start crying, and in that one of the policemen tells the father, whose name is Son, that he is very bad trying to console people, since he only ruins him. But Son tells him that if he were good with communications then he would have already promoted to manager a long time ago. However, the situation becomes more and more chaotic as zombies try to enter the place, when suddenly a loud sound almost like a bang is heard at that moment, and suddenly the zombie's head is blown in front of all the refugees. In that, the policeman orders the 2 of them to go and remove the barricade to check the entrance, and that is how the 4 survivors come out armed, wondering who the person who did this was, but the boy tells them that definitely the cause of all this was a mutant, to which his somewhat intrigued father asks him that he is a mutant. His son replies that it is a more powerful and skilled version of the common zombies, because this is how they are described in comics, novels, and video games. Before this, his father tells him to stop reading that kind of thing because he is not impressed that he is always the worst of his class. However, the policeman draws his attention by telling him not to be so reckless at a time like this, and tells him to focus on watching his surroundings carefully so that they are not ambushed by the mutant. While the policeman gives directions to everyone, they hide in a corridor cautiously. On the other hand, the plotter is reviewing the message from the system, which has entrusted him with the task of rescuing some people in order to gain points. Meanwhile, the group of survivors watches, and the boy does not hesitate to tell them that this person is definitely a mutant, but the policeman when looking at him does not seem to believe that he is a mutant, but rather a common and ordinary survivor. The plotter, who has already noticed the presence of everyone, proceeds to turn around, and with a smile on his face he tells the boy that he has a great imagination for having called him a mutant. However, he tells them that it is still early for the real mutant zombies to have emerged yet. Suddenly the policeman, seeing his attitude, tells him that he is definitely a survivor, and advises him not to walk around the streets alone, as it is very dangerous, and suggests that he better join them, so that he can survive. In that if Ajin asks me if they are the only ones walking around the place, but the policeman tells him that they are looking for supplies, and that there are still many civilians in the city, specifically in the Rongsang Garden. Upon hearing this, the plotter tells him that this place reminds him that there is a mansion nearby and should not be so far from there, to which the policeman affirms that in effect it is not so far, since he is only crossing the street. In that the boy's father kindly tells the plotter to come with them, because if they are more then they can be stronger. In addition, the policeman, who is called Captain Lai, will be able to protect them from the zombies, to which Xiao Zhan, when hearing this, smiles and laughing, is honestly grateful for his treatment. In that zone he asks the plotter with whom he plans to meet in that mansion, since whether he is a relative or a girlfriend, the apocalyptic situation reduces the chances that they are alive, so he tells him to be mentally prepared for that. In that, Captain Lai tells him that he is right, because even if they were not eaten by the insurance mutants, they have already been harmed by those animals. Xiao Zhan, when hearing this, asks him what he means by animals, which he tells him that it is a gang of thugs who meet in the Bihui mountain. They are in charge of eliminating the survivors without any kind of remorse to ensure their own survival. In fact, Captain Lai affirms that he has already found them, and they have lost many of theirs. Then he tells him that there is no need to talk about that, and tells the plotter to keep his guard always high. However, while he says this, a zombie approaches behind him to attack him. He quickly turns around and with a shot in the head he dispatches the zombie. However, it is already too late, because the sound of the shot will attract many other zombies in the area. This makes Captain Lai quite nervous and wondering what he will do now. But he quickly spots a bus in the distance, with which he gives the order to everyone to run to hide there. While Xiao Zhan runs, in his mind he thinks that fleeing in this way can make even more zombies approach, but that bus is also a very good perfect option for defense. So he thinks that the decision the policeman made was not so bad after all. After everyone enters, the plotter is the last to arrive, and in that Captain Lai tells everyone to be careful and check each of the seats in case there is any mutant that is hiding inside. In that, the boy warns everyone that the zombies have not surrendered and are all gathering outside the bus. The zombies are getting more and more, and they are eager to enter. However, Captain Lai is at the limit because he can barely hold them at the entrance. In that, Xiao Zhan approaches, and extending his hand he orders all the zombies at the entrance to fly. This impresses the policeman, who wonders how it is possible that he has a force of that magnitude. But Xiao Zhan tells him not to worry, because he will guard the door so that it does not open, so he can go with the others and keep the zombies away from the windows in the meantime. On the other hand, they have broken the bus window to be able to dispatch the zombies that are more and more. When Captain Lai arrives, he cannot help but think that there are many mutants, and he does not think he has enough bullets in his gun to take care of all of them. In that, the protagonist appears to offer him his crossbow, telling him to use it in his place. This confuses Captain Lai, who wonders where he got a weapon like this, but he tells him that he picked it up out there, and finally he finishes dispatching all the zombies from the place, clearing the entire area. In that, the Son of Sun cannot help but feel euphoric, saying that they have escaped death twice and that it cannot be just mere luck, claiming that surely they are the chosen ones of the apocalypse. But Xiao Zhan advises them to always remain alert and not make mistakes like those again. On the other hand, in the refuge of the protagonist, Jimin has offered himself to be on guard that night. But in that, Xiao Kai with a promiscuous attitude asks why he is so eager to be on guard today, but he mysteriously bothers him and talks to him hard, to which Xiao Kai tells him to calm down because he does not have to be so defensive about that. The grandfather, hearing this, tells everyone that then Jimin will be the one to take the turn of guard tonight, and everyone should go to their rooms to rest. After a while, Jimin is sitting doing his guard without any apparent problem, but soon he thinks to himself that it is already a bit late and that surely everyone should be already asleep. This is how he puts his hands to work and decides to do what he has in mind before the protagonist returns, so he quickly enters the grandfather's room to try to steal the key stealthily. As he approaches, little by little he extends his hand to grab the key, but ends up waking up the grandfather in the act, to which he asks him what he is doing. Faced with this, Jimin hastily proceeds to punch him in the head to try to knock him out, but the grandfather recriminates him and orders him to give him the keys back. These screams resound throughout the hall and end up waking up everyone else. In that, Chan asks his grandfather what is happening, and he replies that the keys to the weapons warehouse have been stolen, so he orders everyone to hurry to stop him. While Jimin is running, he begins to obstacle the chase by throwing a lot of things on the floor. After this, he stops to see the doctor's room where his friend was turned into a zombie, so with a malicious idea in mind he decides to enter. It is as well as once being inside he approaches to free him, however this out of nowhere already seems to have broken his ties. To which Jimin thinks that it is a perfect situation, because that way he will save him the work of having to untie him on his own. While the group approaches the room, they realize that a zombie is running around giving them the back, and in that Sanchi realizes that the zombie of his friend has been released, and that is something that can tempt everyone's life. On the other hand, the grandfather thinks that he would never have imagined that he was so evil, so they have no choice but to do what possible to relock the zombie in the doctor's room. Then he ordered all the boys to spread out and use the methods that the prota taught them to defend themselves. Once they position themselves, they all swing towards the zombie, and Sanchi immediately grabs him by the neck to keep him trained while the others hold him by the arms. And once they have him under control, they proceed to put him back in the doctor's room quickly, and finally they close the door. Before this, everyone wonders if it was quite easy than they imagined when subduing him. However, they have already lost a lot of time, and the evil of Jimin for sure was already done with all the weapons in the warehouse. But in that it appears precisely, and tells them that he could not find all the weapons since they were hidden by Seoyeon, but at least he managed to get hold of one that was there. It is as if pointing towards his previous allies. Jimin threatens them to enter the doctor's room, but Sanchi with a look of disappointment told him to stop what he is doing since the prota has been the one who saved him. However, Jimin reproaches him that a great favor can be transformed into the perdition of all, claiming that the smokes have risen to the prota, and now everyone has become their slaves for life. Faced with these crude comments, the grandfather cannot help but think that there are some people who are ungrateful by nature and it does not matter how good you are with them. However, Jimin aggressively tells them to shut up once and for all and obey his orders. Changing scenes, the prota meets the other group, and Captain Lee is giving him the directions on how to get to the mansion. He mentions that the terrain of that place is quite complicated, which can be perfect for the zombies to hide, and mentions that once his mission is complete he must meet them at the main entrance. Which the prota upon hearing this raises his thumb in a sign of having understood and quickly separates from them. In that zone he asks the Captain Lee if they should not stop him, since he was the one who saved him a while ago. However, he tells him that it does not matter how much they have told him not to go alone, since Seo-chan is still stubborn about wanting to go. On the other hand, the cynical De Jantao is in the building still waiting for new news, but little by little he begins to reach the conclusion that surely Sen is no longer even alive. In that, one of his henchmen tells him that he is already tired of waiting and wants to do what he wants, so they will tie his wife so that he does not try to end his life, and they will do whatever they want. Faced with this, one of the other henchmen comments that he is fine, but warns them to be careful. However, he turns his gaze towards the window and sees that at the entrance all the zombies that were below have been annihilated, leaving him somewhat restless. This is how that henchman opens the door to investigate, wondering if it is a rescue, but suddenly a terror invades him, and a sharp and fast blade cuts his neck before he can react, being eliminated in a matter of seconds. At the same time, the men approach the wife and son of Sen, to which the mother, full of despair, orders them to move away, but two men return her gaze with sinister smiles that freeze her blood, and soon one of them tells her to stop pretending, to which the woman with anguish screams, asking what they are doing and demanding that they leave her son alone, while he is torn from his side, which intensifies his horror. But in that despicable guy tips him a slap, causing the boy to fall to the ground. However, despite the palpable fear, he kneels down and promises to fight bravely for his mother. But suddenly he is thrown through the door with an unexpected brutality, and in a desperate act the boy confronts the men, begging them to set his mother free and reminding them that his father will not forgive them this. And just at that moment a sage kidnapping is thrown into the room, causing the boy to scream terrified. Continuously scared, he looks into the shadow that appears at the door, and finally our plotter appears and asks the boy if Sen is his father, to which the boy trembling murmurs an answer, visibly moved. Meanwhile, the mother, consumed by despair, shrinks in a corner, and suddenly Yantao slaps her, and full of rage shouts at her if she is afraid that her son will hear her, threatening him that if he cooperates the consequences will be very serious. In that, one of the accomplices points out that since there is no answer he will take the front door, and gently caresses the head of the woman, who cries inconsolably. But suddenly at that moment the bedroom door opens suddenly, and a kidnapper mentions to the boy that he has guts to do that, but in an unexpected turn his neck is cut in a fulminant way. In that Yantao, realizing the chaos, turns to the door and asks why they have not yet gotten rid of the boy, when suddenly one of his accomplices falls dead to his feet. Seeing this, Yantao is worried, wondering what is happening, but in a blink of an eye, Xiaoyan grabs his head and throws it back, making him crash against the wall, which impacts very strongly, causing him to spit blood. Immediately one of the very confused accomplices asks him who he is, but the kidnapper responds with an accurate kick that leaves the man trembling. Meanwhile in the fortress, Jimin holds his gun, warning that he will shoot if they do not listen and go to the room indicated, assuring that the villain has a gun and that they must obey him while they elaborate a plan. And in that, Jimin, with a malevolent smile, asks if they think they can do something against him, and warns that if he does not show cruelty right now, he will never establish his control. It is as if smiling, he mentions that the old man will be the first to fall, which this causes Chan and Sanchi to scream in disgust, demanding that he stop. However, at that moment Jimin observes the door of the infirmary, wondering what noise was that. Surprised by this, he wonders about what is happening and how the door of the infirmary was unlocked. And suddenly in that, Chan turned into a zombie appears in front of everyone. Immediately everyone wonders if it was Chan who unlocked the door, although they consider that it is impossible, since he is a zombie and would not use a key. While Jimin incredulously observes Chan, and amazed he asks what is happening, to which this very furious approaches Jimin, dropping drool from his mouth, as if he had something pending against him. But immediately Jimin points him with the gun, ensuring that he cannot allow a zombie who knows how to use a key to open the door to continue alive. It is as if without a doubt he shoots everything at the zombie, but to his surprise the gun does not work. At that moment Jimin feels anguished and shouts that the gun is locked, and Chan then takes advantage of this to launch himself, while Jimin, full of panic, asks how this is possible that this is happening. And it is as if that zombie begins to devour him little by little, and then drags him into one of the rooms. As the tension increases, the group begins to wonder what is happening, and they observe with concern how Chan now seems to be a little calmer. In addition, everyone contemplates Chan with disbelief and amazement, and for their part the old man, seeing the torrent of blood, covers his mouth in a gesture of horror. Subsequently the zombie heads to the door with the keys in his hand, and suddenly throws the keys towards the group, and these fall in front of them surprisingly. Then the zombie returns to the infirmary as if nothing had happened. Faced with this situation, everyone looked in amazement, because they still could not assimilate what was happening, since it was assumed that the zombies attacked people by instinct, but this was not the case of the good Chan. Returning with our protagonist, he has finally managed to contain all the bandits, and in that, with a firm voice, he calls the boy to approach him, which is scared and confused. He looks at Ajin and asks what he wants. Meanwhile the mother of the terrified child hugs him tightly and questions Ajin, who intends to ask him for his son. However, the protagonist ignores the woman and calls the boy again, who despite the fear separates from his mother and tells him that everything will be fine. Then Ajin hands him a knife and instructs him to take it. Then with a cold look he goes to the men who were tied up and orders the boy to eliminate them. Upon hearing this, the men immediately beg for mercy, while the completely concerned mother shouts that she is only a child. But despite his pleas, Ajin seriously addresses the boy, stating that from that moment on the rules change, and explains to him that those men are guilty of the death of his father. Before this revelation, the boy looks at the men with fear in his eyes, and finally with a fixed gaze and full of terror he shouts at them. After killing the men, Yuten, exhausted, sighs, relieved to realize that everything is over, and at that moment the mother shouts her name, horrified, in front of the scene. Shortly after, Yuten asks Ajin if his words are true, if they really ended his father's life, to which our protagonist tells him that indeed it is. Upon hearing this, the mother approaches running, hugging her son and begging Ajin to take him to a safe place, and assures him that he will do anything in exchange for that. However, the boy tells her that he will not leave and that he wants to stay by her side to protect her, and in response Ajin affirms that both will go with him and assures him that everything will be fine, since he promised Sen that he would keep them safe. Already being outside the building, the three walk in the darkness of the apocalyptic night, and at one point given Yuten comes across a lot of bodies, both zombies and people, lying on the ground, and surprised he wonders what kind of being can knock down so many zombies, to which Ajin firmly responds that it was him, but suddenly in that he raises his hand and asks them to stop for a moment. He looks to one side and asks the woman if she has any idea where the 8th building of the Rongsang Garden is located, to which she, surprised, tells him that he should be in the direction in which he is looking and asks him what the reason is. Meanwhile in Building 8, a group of armed men have just arrived, and the leader proclaims that they will redistribute the supplies in a fair way and orders all women under 40 to accompany them. Meanwhile inside the building, the group advances with fear, led by Captain Lai and Sun, who go to the front, but in that a member of the group asks the question about what to do and suggests that the best thing is to surrender. However, Captain Lai responds that those men do not keep their promises, and that in the end no one but women will come out alive. But suddenly the leader of the thugs warns them that they have 10 minutes, and if they do not cooperate he will not leave anyone alive. In that a woman proposes that perhaps they should go out and apologize, but the other opposes, saying that she does not want to become her toy. However, Captain Lai assures them that they will not have problems if they remain firm, and asks them to watch the corridor since that way they could not do anything to them while outside the building. One of the men mentions that although they have good weapons, their leader also has a real gun and complains that if they are still hiding they will not be able to enter the force. However, the leader mentions that this will not be necessary, and orders to close the water supply to the apartments on the first floor, wanting to see how long they can resist. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan accompanied by the woman and her little son arrive in front of the building, and in that Yuten asks him if those are bandits, to which he undoubtedly responds that yes, and pointing out, he says that they scared his mother and him. At the same time, Captain Lai tells them to secure the stairs and not to expose themselves, promising that he will review the situation below, to which people when they see his bravery ask him to be very careful. This is how Captain Lai peeks out the window and counts 7 completely armed people, of which 3 carry extremely dangerous equipment, but suddenly in that he is scared to see something from his position. And inside the building the others also look very confused by the noise they have just heard. Meanwhile outside the leader of the band asks what the hell is going on, when suddenly one of his men is attacked, suddenly, and immediately when he realizes this he shouts asking who is there. In that, Captain Lai soaked in sweat watches terrified, and blunders when recognizing someone, realizing that it was nothing more and nothing less than our protagonist, who guards the building with great determination. And without thinking twice Xiaoyan opens fire against the bandits, and one of them screams in pain when he falls with a shot that eliminates him instantly, and at the same time another thug observes how his partner plummets to his side. Faced with this, 2 men quickly shoot our protagonist, but Xiaoyan very easily dodges all these attacks, making fun of his lack of skill. And suddenly he appears behind the leader without losing a second of sight, to which this very nervous bandit asks where that crazy man came from, but without a doubt Xiaoyan begins to open fire against him, who was hiding behind a small closet. And in that when he saw that they were not doing anything, he asked one of his men what they were doing while he kept him busy, and shouts at him to shoot, which when he hears this the other bandit cursing points to Xiaoyan. But before he can execute his attack, the protagonist quickly turns and shoots him, causing the bandit to scream in pain after receiving 2 impacts. In that the leader seeing that he was not making more attacks laughs at Xiaoyan asking if his bullets have run out, and without a doubt leaves his hiding place warning him to prepare to die. However, he remained very calm at all times, when suddenly that bandit opens fire against him, but despite the distance Xiaoyan manages to dodge the shot very easily. And then he grabs the leader's arm, and twists it and then ends him in just a few moments. Then he observes how the boss's body falls to the ground, and then Xiaoyan approaches the fallen bandit and kneels to check his pulse. After this our plotter enters the building, and 3 armed men with axes await him at the entrance, but Xiaoyan simply watches them seriously. When suddenly in that the 3 attack him at the same time, however he dodges the attacks, and in a blink of an eye he kills them all. After that our plotter orders everyone to leave, and it is as if by doing so the son of Zhang tells him that he has just made an impressive feat. And at the same time several people peeked out of their hiding places to find out what was happening. But suddenly a notification arrives for Xiaoyan, informing him that he had a new mission, which was to recruit survivors from the Rongxian Garden, with a reward of 25 points. After reading this mission our plotter asks who those people are, to which Captain Lai clarifies that they are the beasts of the Bichen villages. Intrigued by this information Xiaoyan asks about this village, which Captain Lai replies that it is to the south of the city. And at that moment 2 friends arrive running, and Captain Lai tells them to hurry to inform the plotter about Bichen since they came from the area. It is as these 2 explain to Xiaoyan that gang is well armed and hiding in the Bichen villages, having captured almost all the survivors of the south. Reflecting on what he had heard, Xiaoyan wonders if that is the place where Lai Chuan and Qin He had settled in their previous life, and begins to doubt if it could really be there. Then, he asks if they are affirming that Bichen is the only refuge left in the south, which one of the men in yellow says yes, explaining that it was not like that before, however due to their weapons the smallest settlements could not defend themselves. And he adds that these bandits lie in the middle of the population in the areas they control and then kidnap young and beautiful women, as well as those who are willing to collaborate. Upon hearing this Xiaoyan concludes that they must indeed be them, to which Captain Lai surprised asks him what that means. Immediately after, the plotter requests him to check the 3 men to verify if they have extra chargers, since this will serve them later, to which Captain Lai mentions that there is likely to be more. Then our plotter hands him his weapon and asks him to also keep that rifle, leaving 5 chargers for him. Faced with this unexpected surprise, Captain Lai, very astonished, observes the rifle and the chargers, and at that moment Xiaoyan affirms that the bandits of the Bichen Mountain will not give up very easily, but he mentions that even with these few weapons they can take care of a dozen people. Therefore, he orders them to stay here for a few days while he returns to his refuge to reorganize and return to face all those bandits. However, one of the men in yellow, very astonished, asks if he is talking seriously, pointing out that Xiaoyan does not have possibilities against them since there are many. And in the same way, Captain Lai warns him that it is not worth taking that risk, and suggests that they should look for another place. He also points out that site is several kilometers away and they will not be able to check the entire city. However, the plotter assures him not to worry, since this is a personal matter between him and those bandits. And to finish, he mentions that in a few days he will return with a larger vehicle to take everyone east of the city. Upon hearing this, Captain Lai, surprised, asks what he means with the other side of the city, to which Xiaoyan confirms that he is near the old tea building of the city, where he has established a fortress and needs help. Finally, Captain Lai says that now he understands, and our plotter says goodbye, asking them to be careful and to remain alert. Meanwhile, outside the building, the zombies lie lifeless on the ground, and elsewhere on the roof of a building near Bichen, a guard closely observes what is happening. Later you can see the bodies of 3 zombies hanging at the entrance of Bichen, and inside a building 4 men are sitting around a table, heatedly discussing a matter. At that moment an elegant man dressed in white, and with glasses named Wenchong asks if they have already obtained the supplies from the entertainment center, to which Lai Chuang replies that he has sent some of his team, and that they should return soon. And in that one of the men mentions that there are very powerful people living in the Hinyu mansion, so they could not only focus on the supplies in the entertainment city. Lai Chuang in turn tells this guy named Kaigan that he has already indicated to his men to bring any survivor. However, when Wenchong recriminates him for not having fulfilled any of the tasks assigned to him, Lai Chuang assures him that there is no reason to worry and promises that this time everything will go according to plan. It is as follows that after this conversation outside the building, Lai Chuang approaches one of his visibly tired men, to whom he asks if everything is fine. But Lai Chuang without a doubt asks about the whereabouts of the 7 men he sent, which this very nervous guy explains that an hour ago he sent someone to investigate, and that there is very bad news. Upon hearing this, Lai Chuang, very angry, asks if they had all been eliminated, and questions how it was possible that only 3 weapons would end them, if in reality the people who were in the Rongxing building were ordinary civilians. And very furious he orders them to warn Tezu to gather all those who are more skilled, since this time he will not allow the situation to get out of control. Meanwhile, Xiao Zhan's car arrives at the fortress, and the first to give the news of his return is none other than Chan Chen, who goes out to see him together with everyone else at the same time, as the protosystem warns him that he has successfully completed the rescue mission of the woman and the child, receiving 25 points as a reward. The entire group receives him with great joy, while he only appreciates how the traitor is the only one missing, which draws a lot of attention of Chan Chan, since apparently the Prota knew about his intentions from the beginning. Without answering the questions that surely everyone has about this, Xiao Zhan asks Sanche to take the woman and the child to one of the rooms that remain, so that later, while they are established, the others meet in the infirmary to carry out their experiment. Minutes later, everyone gathers at the doors of the infirmary, where the old Chenbo asks Xiao Zhan if he always knew that Jimin was planning something bad. The Prota assures that he was not sure who it could be, but if he suspected one of Sanche's friends he could be a traitor, and more than that there was also a beast. The Prota had prepared rubber bullets for when they used the weapons, which made them harmless in case something like Jimin's thing happened. However, what is even more strange is the zombie in the infirmary, since he had shown great intelligence and ability to control himself. Gon, another of Sanchai's friends, was not lucky enough not to be bitten, but the Prota could realize that he was not a common zombie, but a strange variety of the infected. That is why when he stayed with him in the infirmary he asked him if he could understand him by ordering him to blink 3 times to test it. Since the answer was affirmative, he continued with some more questions to confirm how aware Gon was, and in that way he could know that it was a variant. Xiao Zhan explains that after people were infected and affected by the source of the disease, there began to be cases of unique individuals among the zombies becoming variants of the species, becoming stronger and smarter, but above all more dangerous, as they have a much greater potential than any normal zombie. Thanks to this, they can retain some of their memories of their previous life before becoming infected. Fortunately, Gon is a rare specimen among the rare, and that said, the Prota proceeds to open the door so that everyone can see it for themselves, finding the zombie ending up getting rid of the traitor. Surprisingly, and despite the face of few friends, Gon greets them friendly with a smile, leaving everyone uncomfortable and astonished. The Prota happens to order him to stop playing and simply take care of taking out the garbage, before which Gon begins to drag Jimin out of the infirmary while everyone sees him. Sanchai has doubts and approaches to ask if he really can still remember his past life and his friendship. The zombie stops for a second to look at him with anger, letting the tension of the place become unbearable, and then throwing a hand to Sanchai, who dodges it for a while. Far from being an attack, this was just a bad joke from Gon, which confirms for Sanchai that he remembers his friendship, because even being a zombie he still has a pair of very annoying hands. It seems that some things never change. Shortly after everyone discovers Gon's intelligence, the Prota withdraws to his room to rest. Moment when he receives a notification from the system that he has achieved a hidden achievement for having obtained an infected partner by giving him 10 points of reward. Not even the same Xiao Yan expected this to play in his favor, so he decides to open the store to spend his points, finding the usual rewards except for a level 2 box, which is the first one he sees since he got the system. The only problem is that opening it costs 50 points and still does not have that amount, so he decides to open the other two to at least free up space. By doing so, he sees that one of the boxes allows him to block and resist the infection from other sources other than zombies, but he cannot reverse it once it has happened. In other words, it only slows down or blocks the effects of the infection whenever and when it has not been completed. On the other hand, the second box contains several high-caliber souls like a sniper rifle and a lot of ammunition. The Prota is excited to see such good rewards, wondering what a level 2 or 3 armament box will give him, and if it could heal people if he uses the ability to block the infection. At that moment, another mission notice appears to recruit survivors from Rongsang, but although the Prota is eager to open the level 2 box, he prefers to leave it for the next day. During the morning, Xiaoyan gathers everyone to start the shooting practices, which must be carried out at least 1 hour a day. While everyone is shooting, the Prota asks Chenbo to him and the others to take care of emptying some of the rooms for the new survivors he will bring. In turn, he orders Gon to accompany him on the trip while wearing a mask to prevent others from knowing that he is a zombie. When they leave, they arrive at the bus where Xiaoyan helped the group, but Gon is afraid to take off his mask as he is not in the fortress since he does not want to scare anyone. At the same time, Lichuang is finishing gathering his men in a truck to carry out an assault on Rongsang, marching to the same group as the Prota, but with other intentions. After cleaning the zombie bus, Xiaoyan drives fiercely through the streets, running over the infected to reach the Rongsang garden. Here in one of the apartment buildings, Captain Lai and the rest of his group are hiding, who are resting a little right now and eating until they hear the sound of an engine, and think that it is Xiaoyan, who has returned to take them to his fortress. But before they rush and are exposed, Captain Lai asks everyone to remain silent while he peeks out through the window. Unfortunately for everyone, it was not about the Prota, but the truck of Lichuang and his men, who were finishing checking if their weapons work correctly. While they continue to search until they find the correct building, Lichuang gives the order to advance and Captain Lai realizes his presence. But that only means that they have serious problems right now. Unlike Captain Sun, he is not afraid of bandits and prepares his weapon with the others to teach the Lichuang gang a lesson. Another member of the group supports him because they now have weapons, but Captain Lai warns them that they should not underestimate the enemy no matter how much they now have to defend themselves, because they outnumber him and he also has better weapons. That is why the best thing they can do now is take their positions and carry out the emergency plan that they came up with, while Lai goes to the roof. Lichuang and his gang finish carrying out the preparations to face Lai and the others, so they shoot a round of bullets at the windows with the intention of intimidating and drawing their attention. Immediately after, Lichuang takes a megaphone and orders his men to be careful not to be shot. Just before he can say anything on the megaphone, a bullet pierces the head of one of his henchmen, and shortly after another does the same on the leg of someone else. This makes the entire enemy team nervous because now they have to face a rifle. The one responsible for all this is Lai, who is watching everything from the roof while Lichuang orders the others to cover themselves with something to avoid the shots. This was not in their plans because, according to what the group had told him, he only had a small weapon from Captain Lai, and even if they managed to get more than the last confrontation they had, there would only be 4 and they should not have a rifle like this. In that one of Lichuang's henchmen, he asks desperately what they should do, to which the latter replies that they must withdraw immediately. But the guy is so scared that he forgets to listen to his boss's orders, and that's why he ends up full of shots shortly after taking a couple of steps. Knowing that the danger is imminent, Lichuang decides to bet everything on his next move, calling the attention of his entire group so that they attack the building together. But while his men go to their end, he laughs because he got a chance to survive, running towards the truck while everyone falls for the shots of their rifle. One of his men who is still left tries to approach to ask him to take him too, but Lai shoots him with a shot before he can approach. Then try to eliminate the survivors from the truck, but he cannot hit an effective shot, so they escape unharmed. Meanwhile, on the road, the protagonist continues to drive the bus, crossing with the Lichuan truck that passes in front of him at full speed. However, it does not matter to him since the rescue mission and the points are much more important, so he heads to the Rongsang building where they are all meeting with the large number of bodies that the rifle left that he gave to the captain. This helps him also understand that the car of before were the bandits of Lichuan escaping after being repelled. But the important thing now is that Gon does not stop seeing the bodies as if he were a real zombie. Zhaoying knows what is happening to him. He is hungry, and thinks that it is better to give the bodies to him than to leave them for the common zombies in the area. Gon smiles like a maniac, and without thinking he leans on the first body he is closer, while the protagonist orders him that when he finishes he wait for him under the complex of buildings number 8. While Zhaoying heads towards the conscious survivor group, as it is that the meat makes him feel very different, and his eyes darken like those of a normal zombie. Meanwhile, the protagonist walks through the streets full of bodies, being surprised a little by the large number of enemies that Captain Lai eliminated. While he passes directly to the door, the others manage to see him arrive, rejoicing that this time it is really him and he has returned to save them, receiving him as if he were a hero. The group of Lai goes outside to greet him, to which Zhaoying asks him if it was really him who took care of the Lai Chuan band. He confirms it, and everything was thanks to the rifle that the protagonist gave him, since before retiring he was known to be a master of shooting, so he thanks Zhaoying for giving it to him. At that moment a roar sounds that ends the emotion of the moment and everyone turns alert to see what it is. Gon slowly approaches with the enraged expression of a common zombie, which alerts Lai and the others, preparing to eliminate him with a shot. However, Zhaoying stops him and warns them not to get excited unnecessarily, since that zombie they are seeing is coming with them. Captain Lai does not understand what he means unless when the zombie stops in front of a body. As soon as the protagonist gives him green light to devour him, Gon reacts and leans on him. This makes Lai think that the protagonist can only communicate with zombies, but nothing further from reality. Zhaoying explains to them that Gon is not an ordinary zombie, but does not give them the details since he prefers to keep them when they are in a safer place, so he asks everyone to get on the bus and so he can explain to them on the way. While he and the others get ready to leave, Gon continues to eat without stopping, to which the protagonist warns him that he must hurry because if not they will leave him behind. Moments later we see Gon putting on his gas mask and approaching the back of the bus, where everyone else continues to see him with some fear. Sun is a bit upset to see how even a zombie has a toy for himself, although he mocks a little about how he looks like a little boy with a toy to chew. Zhaoying warns him not to say that in front of Gon because even if he is friendly with people that does not mean that he likes to be insulted, but the boy thinks it's a bit great to see him with a mask like that. Leaving the jokes aside, Gon gets on the bus and when he does the latter stumbles to one side due to his weight, warning everyone because he does not seem so big. Gon also surprises the protagonist by giving him a key and showing that he already has the ability to speak, although he can only do it with a lot of effort, and it is still almost incomprehensible. Seeing this, Zhaoying realizes that after eating 6 people, Gon has begun to evolve into a different type of zombie. And that is why he understands that he must hurry to convert all the points he can by force to become the most powerful if he needs to face it. That is why he knows that he must obtain a specific power. But for now the priority is to go to his fortress quickly. We go to see Lichuang, who is meeting with the rest of his group, who scold him for having failed the mission of taking the Rongxian garden. He tries to defend himself by explaining that he had a rifle and that was what made all the difference in combat. But his boss does not believe him because he was facing a simple policeman and it should not be possible that he had a weapon of that caliber, unless in the conditions in which they are. Lichuang continues to defend his position and urges everyone to go to the building in person to prove that he is not lying. However, his bosses kick him and order him to leave before he infuriates them more. Scolding, Lichuang accepts and leaves. One of them, called Akai, does not stop thinking that they have suffered several losses thanks to Lichuang, so he suggests that the best option is simply to get rid of him. This surprises the other men in the meeting a bit, but not entirely since they know that he has been after Lichuang's wife. Akai suggests that they will share her when they get rid of him, before which everyone ends up accepting to wait for the perfect opportunity. What no one had noticed is that Lichuan was hiding to hear everything, and now he no longer trusts them. As a result, as soon as he returns home, he begins to destroy everything he finds in his path. Kinky appears to ask him what is wrong and try to calm him down with his beauty, but Lichuan orders him to hurry to pack everything they have. She does not understand why they have to leave so quickly in the middle of the apocalypse, to which Lichuan warns him that they probably cannot stay in this place for longer and need to prepare as much as possible for the problems that come. Lichuan calls his assistant to give him orders to bring the men who remain to fight and to meet at midnight to carry out his plan, all while Kinky watches him with distrust and fear. We go back to Prota and his group who, after a long journey, arrive at the fortress of the east, and as soon as they get off the bus the son of Zongzi marvels at how large Xiaoshan's home is. After bringing the survivors from the Ronxian garden, the Prota obtains the reward for his mission, but having surpassed the necessary number of people, he receives more points as a reward, reaching a total of 66. When getting off the bus, he asks him to get him to the south of the city tomorrow night. This calls the attention of Captain Lai, who asks the reason for this. Xiaoshan has in mind to settle accounts with Lichuan and Kinky for what they did to him in his past life, but he does not tell the captain. As soon as he is alone in his room, he opens the store system. Now that he has many more points, he can open the level 2 box that offers him a supply of dark technology. And now the only thing that the Prota can expect is that this reward does not disappoint him. After opening the high-tech box, the Prota receives a potion that increases his physical ability by 20 points. Demonstrating as soon as you start that this box is worth each of the points you spent on it, and that it is much better than a level 1. When using it, a flash of light occurs in the room, and when you start to analyze well, you realize that 33 points of physical ability are 6 times the potential of an average person. Which means that right now he is much stronger than a normal human. At that moment, a mosquito passes near Xiaoyan, and he, to test his new skills, decides to make her a kung fu master and catch him in mid-flight. But it turns out that he is so precise and agile that he manages to hold him by the legs with enough gentleness as not to crush him. Shortly after, he lets him go, satisfied that he was able to achieve such a feat with great ease. Moments later, we see the friends of the Prota practicing shooting in the courtyard when he appears heading for the bus, which attracts the attention of Captain Lai. The latter asks him if he plans to go to the south of the city as he had previously said, and Xiaoyan confirms that if he will do so and that he also takes Gon with him. It seemed that Captain Lai was going to offer to go with him, but instead he only asks him what orders he has for him. Apparently he has already recognized him as his absolute leader and does not intend to question any of his decisions. Xiaoyan knows that after him the person with the best aim in the refuge is Lai, so he orders him to stay to help and train all the others in shooting. Captain Lai understands and without a doubt assures that he will do a good job with the others. Having done this, the Prota retires along with Gon towards the bus, and minutes later the two leave the refuge towards the south of the city, where they plan to finish with the gang of thugs in the Ronxian garden. Very soon it becomes night, and this time we go to the aforementioned garden where we see Lai Chu, and together with the rest of his men, prepared for the action of this night. Lai Chu asks about where the others are, but his men assure that they are already in position and ready to execute the attack plan. He and the others go outside to start, but then a car turns on the lights to stop them. Here you can see a lot of bandits, and inside the car a man and a woman responsible for everything. Among all the crowd, one of the men appears armed with a gun. He is Don, one of Lai Chuan's bosses. The latter realizes that they are in danger, because this can only mean a trap or something even worse, and wonders how they were discovered before they could even begin. As he still does not know if his plan has been revealed, he tries to pretend to be innocent and assure Don that they were only preparing to go to the Ronxian garden, in an attempt to conquer the area, taking advantage of the darkness of the night and the calm of this. Maybe they could achieve it while everyone was asleep. Don questions if they really planned to go to the Ronxian garden, and then drops one of his men in the middle of the street. Another of Lai Chuan's henchmen believes that it is his partner Qin Zai, but his boss hits him to silence him and make him notice that it is not his friend, but someone different. Lai Chuan continues to try to look innocent and ask who this person is, since he does not know him, knowing that a single error in his performance could mean the end for him and everyone else. Don does not believe any of his words, so he decides to act and end this matter once and for all, ordering his men to shoot Lai Chuan and his team mercilessly. After the shots, Lai Chuan realizes that among his own is the only one alive, but he still believes that he has a chance to pretend innocence, since there is no proof yet of what he plans to do. So he asks confusedly to Don what he is doing, and that he does not know the man who shot in the middle of the street. Don is already tired of pretending, so he asks Lai Chuan to look closely at who is inside the car. When he looks better through the light of the lights, he realizes that for his bad luck, he is sitting next to the leaders of the group of bandits. One of them tells him that she has already revealed everything about her plan to betray the association, and that is why they have gone to stop him. Lai Chuan cannot believe that this woman has betrayed him, but if we think about it, she can do that to anyone who is no longer useful. While he complains and tries to get to her to take revenge, the High Command decide how to end this problem, which Sang orders them to simply cut this bad grass. Or rather leave it as a hanging decoration. In this way, shortly after they take Lai Chuan and he finds his end because of a rope. We move on to the protagonist who are arriving at the hideout of the bandits meeting Lai Chuan's body, but fortunately for him they appeared in time to see him still alive. Seeing him, the protagonist remembers what he did to him in his past life and how he would like him to stay there to receive his punishment. However, he feels a little bad that he is not the one who gives it to him, so using a short stone the rope, when his former enemy is on the ground, Xiao Shan kneels down next to him calling him a dog, but suggesting that he make a truce so that he can take revenge on the bandits and in passing help him to finish off his entire group. But in that another of the leaders hears a commotion outside the room. Apparently the protagonist has already begun to act. At the moment when everyone realizes what happens when they see the bodies on the ground, the protagonist appears out of nowhere in the window with an expression of indifference, indicating that he is ready to finish off all those present, even if he has to do it for the bad ones. At the moment he uses his knife and uses it to cut off the neck of the first enemy he encounters, which falls to the ground as quickly as the protagonist enters the room. Zhang is terrified to see this and asks who he is, but Yingzi recognizes him as her former Xiao Shan, and like her boyfriend she cannot believe what they see. The protagonist does not give them time to react and throws his knife directly at Zhang, who cannot react in time to dodge it, so he ends up falling to the ground before even doing anything to defend himself. At the same time that the protagonist's ex can only see this from the bed, screaming disconsolate and terrified to be defenseless. When he sees the protagonist he asks why he does this and what objective he has, but Xiao Shan only laughs at seeing her tied to a bed, thinking that he should have been having a good time before he arrived. This is very funny to him, because he had been wondering what Lai Zhuang would think when he saw her with another man when she would supposedly be only for him. Hearing this makes Yingzi nervous, because she did not expect her previous prey to discover it, and at that moment the protagonist opens a door, through which Lai Zhuang enters turned into a zombie. And without thinking he attacks the protagonist's ex to start eating her from the neck. Yingzi before this asks the protagonist for help, scared that this is her end, and tries to apologize for everything he did to her. However, Xiao Shan already had enough of his lies, so he slowly leaves the apartment where they are, enjoying every moment in which his ex receives his deserved, leaving her alone so that his previous man eats her until the last bite. A while later it is night and he meets Gong, ordering him to use the bodies of those who were left on the street to be eaten. His zombie friend understands what he means, so he approaches the bodies of the fallen to start his feast. But while he does that, the protagonist uses his skills to hear what is happening in another of the nearby buildings. We then see a lot of people trapped in a kitchen, to which a chef arrives with the face of few friends, and he is accompanied by a man with a large knife. The latter holds a girl, mentioning that her skin is soft and her flesh tender, which causes the little one to scream in fear when she is held by the man. The boss tells him that they cannot use her, because she is too thin, so in his place he directs his gaze at a more full child. The mother of this one realizes what they chose, and denies in fear that they are going to take him with them. The chef takes the boy by the wrist, but his mother begins to scream disconsolate because she lets him go, and tries to cling to him, but the chef explodes with anger and hits him with the one who throws him to the ground. While the boy is going to help his mother, she begs the chef to forgive him because he is just a boy, and after that he begins to ask the rest of the people who are present there for help, appealing to their compassion, but none of them even turns to see how all this happens, indicating that in a certain way, they agree with everything that is happening. At that moment there is a bang at the door, which draws everyone's attention, so they prepare to fight. The chef also notes that the marks on the door are shotgun shots, and wonders who could have one in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, to which one of his men replies that only the boss could have one. But then it makes no sense for them to attack them. While the men prepare to fight, the boy returns with his mother, who is relieved that she was able to save herself from them, at least for now. The door begins to open slowly, and the chef orders one of his cooks to go and see what is happening. The latter does not want to, but his boss forces him to move to inspect the situation. In this way the man takes a gun, and slowly approaches the door only to be caught by the hand of a zombie, who pulls him out and alerts the rest, who prepare their guns to defend themselves. Everyone starts shooting through the wooden door, but the zombie moves away from the bullets, passing through the covered doors. The men try to follow him, but his enemy is much faster and more sluggish than them. The zombie in question turns out to be gone, who enters the place in a hurry, breaking one of the covered windows with an animal growl. As soon as he does, he swings against the boss chef, takes him by the neck, and with his inhuman strength he twists him back. When landing, he does not lose a second and throws himself like a wild beast towards those who remain, who can only scream in terror in front of an enemy that they cannot defeat. At the end of the fight, the only one standing is Gon, who inspires a lot of fear in the people who remain, who think they are the next on his list. However, when they see him closely, they understand that this zombie is different from the others, thinking that he has some different problem of wanting to eat them. The protagonist appears at that moment, who is impressed that even with chains and a mask, it is so dangerous that a group of armed men could not with him. Gon even gives himself the luxury of showing off, calling himself fresh and elegant. The fact that a zombie can speak scares the people in the room. Gon remains silent when he realizes what he has just done, but although he remains still doing nothing, the rest of the people around him do not feel comfortable seeing a zombie. Unless when they discover that he is as intelligent as he is to speak. The protagonist approaches them to calm the situation, asking everyone not to be afraid, since Gon will not attack them. One of the women is still suspicious of the monster, since he is a zombie, that is, a creature that attacks and devours humans without even hesitating or blinking. Xiaoyan understands that the words are not going to be enough to convince these people, but she also realizes that she and her daughter have seen something similar to Gon before, so she approaches to ask them, confirming their suspicions. He then asks them where they saw such an intelligent monster, and the woman replies that in the Eastern City decoration market. This fills the protagonist with concern, because he did not expect the modified zombies to appear so soon, and in fact he believed that it would take at least 1 or 2 months before they evolved to that level. In addition to that, the decoration market is not far from the ancient city of T. Gon is confused by how much they are saying, so he approaches them to ask what is happening. The protagonist replies that like him, it is a mutant and rare zombie. The level of rationality of zombies usually varies, which increases the hunting efficiency beyond what a normal zombie can achieve, which is why mutants are usually more dangerous, since their bodies adapt better when it comes to devouring humans. However, these changes are not usually stable, so most of those who manage to get to that point become dangerous and out of control. Hearing this fills Gon with fear, since he has no idea what is going to happen to him if he continues to mutate. The protagonist places his hand on his shoulder to calm him down, telling him that he is one of the few lucky ones who did not lose his human mind, and also that with the blue he will not let him lose his sanity. Leaving this issue aside, the protagonist returns with the civilians to ask if there are more survivors in the area of Villavilu. They respond that there are still many people locked up in the sales office and in the basement. Xiao Zhang along with the rest of the people begins to walk through the place, finding something disturbing. He discovers that these people hunt the survivors who are nearby, and then they massacre them. He wonders if this is the reason why there are no survival camps in the city of the south. But what confuses him the most is why they take the lives of so many people, since they should not be able to eat so much meat. One of the survivors informs him that they move the rest to other places, but he does not know which or how many of them there are. Xiao Shang knows approximately how many places there are, and he comes to the conclusion that they cannot eat all the meat, so they must be feeding the zombies. He then asks them to tell him about the sales office they mentioned. The man from before replies that he is near the south gate, about a kilometer from where they are, and that this is where the captured people are taken. But those who are eliminated are sent to this site to be massacred. Upon hearing this, the window of the Proto system is activated, giving him a new mission that consists of expanding the community, and offers 20 points as a reward. We go to see the sales office, where 2 men are nervous because they heard that there were shots at the north gate, but one of them attributes it to the fact that they must be practicing shooting with living people. At the moment they are neglected, Gon appears behind them, and before they can resist he easily eliminates them. A group of girls inside the department hear the commotion, and one is scared because she thinks it is better that they do whatever they want, for the zombies to enter to eat them or turn them. At that moment the door opens, and although the girl thought the monsters were entering, it was actually only the Prota, who asks all those present to go out with him. A while later a group of survivors accompanies him, including a girl who saved him, asks him if he is really willing to provide everyone with a safe place. The Prota promises them that this will be the case, provided that everyone and each of them work to maintain it. This is not a problem for the survivors, since everyone is healthy and ready to do it. The Prota then does not waste time, and takes them all on his bus, reaching his refuge on the outskirts of the city. His friends see him from one of the towers, but they notice that he did not go directly to the doors, so they decide to wait to see what he is doing. The Prota presents the fortress to all of them, but warns that he cannot let them in yet. This confuses some of the survivors, since they do not know where they will live, but Zioin prepared cabins in advance with a wire fence around, to serve as a temporary refuge, since it is better than the area near the city. Since in this ancient city of Tona there are still many buildings and open space, they need time to improve and renovate the housing conditions, but the people in front of him do not worry about this, and they are only grateful that the prota is so generous with them. The next morning a woman arrived at the Rongseng garden. She is upset that Zhang did not answer her, and instantly realizes that something is wrong. He enters the building, but only to discover that all the workers there have become zombies. Lai Chuan tries to attack her, but the woman with a single hand takes care of him, and with a knife eliminates all the walkers. His bodyguard asks him what they should do, because now Zhang does not know what they should do with the meat. The woman explains that they will take care of themselves from now on, but before that she wants to take care of whoever has messed with them, even if she has to do it on her own. The name of this woman is Zin, and when leaving the building her bodyguard informs her that there is not a single survivor left in the area. She is not interested in knowing that, and instead asks her what happened to the meat. The man replies that the meat is still in place, so she orders him to bring it and load the truck to leave. While he and the rest of his men get to load the truck, Zin stands aside looking at the place, until he notices something on the ground. He has found some very clear wheel marks on the ground, and wonders who could have achieved this, and what skill is needed to do it, since apparently he has realized a possible clue to find his prey. On the other hand, the prota reviews the mission, because he does not know how to increase the classification of the community, but he comes to the idea that the population figure must be a key factor for this. Thanks to the fact that whoever sold him the land underestimated him at that time, he has enough land to admit a lot of people inside his refuge, but now he must take care of something else, and for that, he goes down to the temporary refuges of the survivors he brought recently. When people see him they recognize him and call Salvador, throwing himself near him to praise him and thank him for helping them when they needed him. The prota feels a little uncomfortable with this worship they do to him, but it does not prevent him from asking the woman from before where he saw the mutant zombie. She replies that in a market in Garenfa, near the city of decoration, and that he found it while looking for supplies with his group, but then they ran into that monster. And as a result several people ended up losing their lives. In the midst of chaos and fear they all separated. As a result she and her daughter escaped the scene, and they met the people of the Vilu mountain, mistakenly thinking at that time that they were safe from any danger. Although it did not take long to realize that the people of that place were just as horrible as the walkers. The prota recognizes the place that the woman mentions, but at that moment they arrive to consult him about the supplies. For his part Chang believes that they have enough supplies to survive for a while, and there is no need to risk that monster to get more. However Sanche knows that they will end up running out sooner or later, so they should look for more before they really need them. The prota thinks that the main problem is that the city of decoration is less than 2 kilometers from them, so they must face that monster so that it does not threaten their safety. Hearing this scares the woman, who asks the prota not to go because he knows what that monster is capable of, but Xiao Zhan asks him to calm down since he knows what they are doing. Having said this, he asks Sanchai to look for Uncle Chong, because they are going to face that monster. We go to see the city, where a group of survivors is approaching a market. Among them one begins to bother the others because he was right to guide them. Still another of his companions is pessimistic about it, since they could have cleaned it up other people. The leader asks him to have some hope, since in all those who searched before they had something saved. The group is confident that they can do whatever it takes to survive, but upon entering they find that the entire market is empty and has already been looted. The leader named Wang hits a pan against the wall, trying to call survivors, but this only attracts zombies, which are easily eliminated among all. Seeing that there are only a few, the group thinks that the main horde must have been attracted by the last group of scavengers, and they believe that they are lucky because then they will not have anyone to bother them in their looting. While they cross the place, the mutant zombie finds them and detects fresh prey. The group arrives at a store where there are some supplies, and they even find a bed that Wang likes, and he does not think twice before falling into it. The entire group celebrates having found this place, and decide to settle here directly. Of how happy they are, 2 of them decide to go out to smoke. One asks his friend if they are really going to stay, but the latter replies that the shopping center has too many entrances, so it makes defense difficult. In addition, it will definitely attract others. Before he can continue talking, the mutant zombie appears out of nowhere and pierces him with his claws, scaring the other men while he imagines how delicious it will be to eat them. The man flees scared, warning his friends, but he cannot flee from the mutant that also pierces him and splits him in 2. The group panics and starts fleeing, but the monster is much faster so he jumps on them to hunt them one by one. As they run, the monster kills more and more of them, but the only one left is Wang, who trips in the last second, falling at the mercy of the monster. However, at that moment someone else appears at the exit, with whom he has arrived to face the monster. Wang thinks that this is another zombie that wants to eat her, but when he tries to cover himself, Gong simply passes by his side, completely ignoring her. While this happens, the prota approaches him and asks him not to be afraid, while Sanchai accompanies him. This girl recognizes him as the man who bought the property in the city of T, and he remembers that she is the seller of before, as well as his name. However, at that moment a horrible commotion occurs and she realizes that he is the monster from the mall. She asks them to scream that they flee before he catches them, but the prota calms her down, explaining that that monster will be retained. She turns to see the interior of the place and is surprised by what she finds. Gong is holding the zombie mutant, who thinks he wants to keep all the glory to himself. Zhao Zhan asks him if he can handle it alone, and Gong assures him that at least he will try. The fight begins, and the zombie mutant takes distance from a jump, happy that he has finally met someone of his own species for the first time. He jumps forward in a row to try to finish off Gong in one fell swoop, but he dodges it by taking a step back. The mutant wonders if eating those of his own species will make them evolve faster, so he will use Gong to test that theory. But before he can react, Gong punches him in the face, which the mutant receives fully, crashing against the ground, recognizing that Gong is much better fighter than he seems. The latter raises his leg and crushes him with a kick while he is on the ground, but the mutant reacts in time to jump and cling to the roof, dodging the blow. He tells him that the force he has accumulated by hunting this time can finally be used, since he is someone who will not break so easily. Gong cannot believe what he sees, but the mutant leans on him with a maniacal emotion, starting to move frenetically everywhere, demonstrating an unparalleled power and speed for Gong. This worries Sanji a lot, who asks the prota how there is a zombie as strong as to rival Gong. For his part, Xiao Zhan realizes that it was a good idea to come ahead of time, because if the mutant is at this level now, letting him hunt for longer would have made him a fairly serious threat to his entire refuge. Knowing this, he takes out a rifle from his inventory, which surprises Wang because he does not understand how he did it as if it were magic. The prota begins to point and asks Gong to help him, promising that if he does he will not make fun of him later. Having said this, Gong holds the mutant by the wrists to immobilize him. In this way, Xiao Zhan can have an accurate shot at his head, and the zombie when receiving it falls backwards. The bullet did not serve to fulminate him, but the zombie recognizes that it hurt him a lot and gets angry about this, promising that he will destroy him as soon as he has the opportunity. Seeing this, Sanji gets even more scared because the mutant zombie's brain received a direct shot, but it has not yet fallen like the rest of his species, which makes it a very serious threat to any survivor. The prota does not waste time with this surprise and releases a burst of shots on the mutant's body, which can only scream and grunt as it begins to fill with holes. After a while of emptying the charger, the monster falls to the ground, barely staying alive. The prota asks Gong to try to eat this mutant, and by doing this the mission to expand the community appears, indicating that the score of this has increased thanks to the fact that he saved Wang and eliminated a dangerous element. The prota wants to take advantage of the fact that they came here to explore and empty the supermarket, which takes Wang by surprise. In an instant, Xiao Zhan activates his magic to store everything around him, leaving even Sanji impressed, who had not seen this magic until now. Apart from this, he wants to take care of the bodies before they mutate, so he asks Gong to eat them if he still has an empty stomach. We go to Season again, who asks to stop the truck near the refuge of the prota, and his guard observes Chan Chan at the top of a surveillance tower. In addition to a lot of survivors in the temporary cabins, the guard believes that the only advantage they have is that their lair is well built, which makes them wonder how they ended up with Sanji and the others. Xin thinks they made a stealthy attack, and used the zombies to take care of them, since the village was not safe as a base. She thinks she is lucky that now they were able to find a new base, but before taking the pied she regroups with the rest of her group, to bring more weapons and people the next time. While they leave, Wang finds out thanks to Sanji of all the advantages that the prota's fortress has, and that it even has hot water to bathe. On the way, Xiao Zhan notices a car later, and Sanji prepares his rifle. The two vehicles cross, as well as the looks of the prota and Xin, which activates a new mission.